I stood alone in the funeral home, staring at the empty chairs that should have held my family. My hands trembled as I clutched the small teddy bear Lucas had slept with every night since he was 3. The funeral director kept glancing at me with pity as the minutes ticked by and no one else arrived. Just 3 days ago, my sister Madison had screamed at me through the phone that his death was my problem because she was pregnant and needed her vacation. My mother's words cut even deeper when she said I was strong enough to cope alone. As I placed that worn teddy bear next to my baby boy in his casket, I couldn't stop thinking about how my entire family had chosen a luxury Caribbean cruise over saying goodbye to my son. The nightmare began on a Thursday evening that started like any other. Lucas had been so excited about his sleepover at his best friend David's house. They were planning to work on their science project about ocean ecosystems, and Lucas had spent the previous week researching dolphins and coral reefs. He hugged me goodbye with that gap-toothed smile that always melted my heart, his inhaler safely tucked in his overnight bag like always. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. David's mother was hysterical, barely able to form coherent words between sobs. Lucas had suffered a severe asthma attack. The inhaler hadn't been enough. The ambulance was taking him to Riverside General Hospital. I don't remember driving there, only suddenly finding myself in the emergency room still wearing my pajamas and mismatched shoes. Dr. Harrison met me with that look medical professionals get when they have to deliver the worst news imaginable. They had tried everything. The attack had been too severe, triggering cardiac arrest. My healthy, vibrant 10-year-old son, who had been talking about becoming a marine biologist just hours before, was gone. I collapsed in that sterile hospital corridor. A nurse named Patricia held me as I screamed, her own eyes filled with tears. When I finally found the strength to see him, Lucas looked peaceful, like he was just sleeping. I kissed his forehead and whispered all the things I'd never get to tell him again. My fingers shook as I called my parents. It was 3:45 in the morning, but this was the kind of call that couldn't wait. My father answered on the third ring, his voice groggy and irritated. The irritation vanished when I managed to choke out the words that Lucas was gone. "We'll be there as soon as we can," he promised. I heard my mother's voice in the background asking what was wrong. There was muffled conversation I couldn't make out. Then my father cleared his throat, and his next words shattered what was left of my heart. "Actually, Yvonne, we have a situation. We've already paid for this cruise $9,000 non-refundable. It leaves in 2 days. Madison and Tyler are going too with Tyler's new girlfriend. We can't get our money back." I stood in that hospital corridor, my son's body growing cold in the next room, and listened to my father explain why a vacation was more important than supporting me through the worst moment of my life. "Lucas is already gone," he said, as if that made it logical. "But this vacation can still happen. We've been planning it for months." The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered on the linoleum floor. Patricia picked it up, heard my father still talking about cruise logistics, and hung up on him. She held me as I sobbed, this stranger showing more compassion than my own family. I called Madison next, praying my sister would be different. She answered on the first ring, already knowing something was wrong. When I told her about Lucas, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed, and I knew before she spoke that I was about to be devastated again. "Oh, Yvonne, this is terrible timing. I'm 13 weeks pregnant, and my doctor says I need to avoid stress. A funeral would be too much for me right now. Plus, we already packed for the cruise. Jordan bought new swim trunks and everything." My baby sister, who I'd held when she was born, who'd been Lucas's favorite aunt, was choosing swimwear over saying goodbye to him. I tried to make her understand. Lucas had loved her. He'd drawn pictures for her baby, excited about becoming a big cousin. None of it mattered. "His death is your problem," she said, her voice cold and practical. "I'm pregnant and I need this vacation. The doctor says relaxation is important for the baby." Tyler didn't even answer his phone. He texted me 2 hours later. "Sorry about Lucas. Can't miss the cruise. Brittany is excited. Mom says you'll be fine." By sunrise, I was alone in that hospital, making arrangements to transport my son's body to a funeral home. The social worker kept asking if I had family coming to support me. I couldn't bring myself to tell her that I did have family, they just cared more about sun and sand than their grandson and nephew. I selected a casket by myself, chose flowers by myself, wrote an obituary by myself. The funeral director, Mr. Jacobson, had been in business for 30 years. He told me later he'd never seen a mother have to do everything alone like that. He kept offering me tissues and water, small kindnesses that meant everything when my own blood had abandoned me. That night, I sat in Lucas's room surrounded by his drawings of sea creatures and his collection of shells from our trips to the beach. His inhaler still sat on his nightstand, a painful reminder of how quickly everything had changed. I picked up his favorite book about whales and remembered how he'd read it to me just last week, proud that he could pronounce all the scientific names. My phone buzzed with a notification from social media. Madison had posted a photo of her cruise outfits laid out on her bed with the caption, "Paradise-bound baby moon starts in 36 hours." The comments were full of excitement and congratulations. Not one person seemed to know or care that her nephew had just died. I threw my phone across the room, shattering the screen against Lucas's bookshelf. It felt good to break something, to have some physical manifestation of my shattered heart. Then I curled up in his bed, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, still on his pillow, and cried until I had no tears left. The next morning brought no relief from the nightmare. I forced myself to continue making funeral arrangements, each decision a fresh wound. Should we have an open or closed casket? What music would Lucas have wanted? The funeral home needed answers, and I had no one to help me make these impossible choices. I decided to try reaching my family one more time. Maybe the shock had worn off. Maybe they'd realized how monstrous their behavior was. I started with my mother calling her as I sat in the funeral home's selection room, surrounded by tiny caskets no parent should ever have to choose from. "Mom, please, I'm picking out Lucas's casket alone. I need you here. He was your grandson." She sighed heavily as if I was being unreasonable. "Yvonne, you've always been the strong one. Even as a child, you never needed us the way Madison did. You'll handle this. You always do." "I'm not strong right now, Mom. I'm broken. My baby is dead." "Don't be dramatic. You'll get through this. We'll send flowers to the funeral home. What's the address?" "You'll send flowers. You'll send flowers, but you won't come. The cruise leaves tomorrow morning. We'd have to drive 5 hours to the port. If we come to the funeral, we'll miss it. Be reasonable, Yvonne." I hung up on her, my hands shaking with rage now instead of grief. Mr. Jacobson quietly placed a box of tissues near me and asked if I'd like him to give me some space. I shook my head. His silent presence was more comforting than any words my mother had offered. Madison was next. I caught her at home, the sound of packing evident in the background. I tried a different approach with her, appealing to her future motherhood. "Madison, when your baby is born, you'll understand how this feels. Please don't leave me alone with this. Lucas loved you so much. He was so excited about your pregnancy." "Stop trying to guilt-trip me," she snapped. "My therapist says I need to protect my energy during pregnancy. Your grief is toxic to my baby. I have to think about my child, not yours." "He was your nephew." "Was. Past tense. He's gone. Yvonne. My being there won't bring him back. But stress could hurt my baby who's actually alive. Why would I risk that?" She launched into a lecture about pregnancy hormones and the importance of relaxation, as if she was the first woman to ever carry a child. I thought about all the pregnant women throughout history who'd faced tragedies and still showed up for their families. But Madison had always been selfish. I just never thought it extended to this level of cruelty. Tyler surprised me by actually answering his phone. For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. My little brother had always been the peacemaker in our family. "Tyler, please. I know Brittany is excited about the cruise, but this is Lucas. Remember how he always wanted to show you his baseball card collection? How you promised to take him to a game this summer?" "How?" "Yeah, about that," Tyler said uncomfortably. Look, Brittany already bought 3 new bikinis and posted about the trip on Instagram. All her friends know we're going. It would be embarrassing to cancel now. Embarrassing. My son is dead and you're worried about Instagram. It's not just that. Mom and Dad would be furious if I bailed. You know how they are about money. $9,000 is a lot to waste. Lucas's life is worth more than $9,000. I didn't say it wasn't, but he's already gone, Yvonne. Whether I'm at his funeral or on a beach, he's still dead. At least on the cruise, some good comes from this situation. The casualness of his cruelty took my breath away. This was my baby brother who I'd helped with homework, who I'd defended from bullies, who'd been Lucas's fun uncle, who always brought him comic books. Now he was talking about my son's death like it was an inconvenience to his vacation plans. I made one final attempt with my father calling him that evening. He answered with irritation already in his voice. Yvonne, we've discussed this. The decision is made. Dad, I'm begging you. I've never asked you for anything. Please be here for Lucas's funeral. He was your only grandchild. And throwing away $9,000 won't bring him back. Do you know how hard I worked for this vacation? How long your mother and I have been planning this? How can you be so cold? I'm being practical. Something you should learn. Death is a part of life. You need to accept it and move on. He died yesterday. And he'll still be dead whether we're there or not. But that money will definitely be gone if we don't get on that ship. That's when my Aunt Helen called. My father's sister rarely contacted me directly, so I was surprised to hear from her. Yvonne, honey, I just heard about Lucas. I'm so sorry. When is the funeral? I'll drive down from Portland. Her kindness made me cry all over again. I told her the details, then couldn't help but share how my family was abandoning me for a cruise. There was a long silence on her end. Yvonne, there's something you should know. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but given the circumstances, your parents booked that cruise 3 days ago, after Lucas was admitted to the hospital. The room spun. I gripped the phone tighter, sure I'd misheard. That's not possible. Dad said they'd been planning it for months. I know because your mother called me to brag about the last-minute deal they got. She said something about how they were sure Lucas would recover and the family would need something happy to look forward to after the stress. They gambled that he'd be fine, and they lost. I couldn't speak. My parents had literally bet against my son's life. While I was sitting in that hospital praying for a miracle, they were booking a Caribbean vacation. The cruelty of it was incomprehensible. I'm so sorry, honey. I'll be at the funeral. You won't be alone, I promise. After we hung up, I sat in Lucas's room for hours trying to understand how the people who were supposed to love us most could be so heartless. His drawings were still taped to the walls, colorful fish and whales and octopi that he'd spent hours perfecting. On his desk was the Mother's Day card he'd made me just 2 months ago. To the best mom in the whole ocean, love, Lucas. I realized then that my son had shown me more love and loyalty in his 10 short years than my family had shown in my entire life. The truth of that broke something inside me that I wasn't sure would ever heal. That night, I made a decision. If they wanted to abandon us, fine. But I would give Lucas the send-off he deserved, surrounded by people who actually cared about him. I started making calls to his teachers, his baseball coach, his friends' parents. Every single person I spoke to was horrified by my family's behavior and promised to be there. Mrs. Chen, his 4th grade teacher, cried on the phone. Lucas was such a special boy. Of course I'll be there. All of his classmates want to come too, if that's okay. They've been making cards and drawings for you. Coach Martinez offered to have the team serve as pallbearers. Lucas was the heart of our team. The boys want to honor him. David's mother still racked with guilt, even though I'd assured her it wasn't her fault organized a meal train for after the funeral. You shouldn't have to worry about cooking on top of everything else. These people, some of whom I barely knew, were showing up for Lucas and me in ways my own family refused to. It was a bittersweet realization that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand by you when life becomes unbearable. The morning of Lucas's funeral arrived gray and drizzling as if the sky itself was mourning. I stood in my bedroom staring at the black dress I'd never imagined wearing for my son. My phone buzzed with a notification, and against my better judgment, I looked. Madison had posted a countdown, "Cruise day tomorrow, baby moon adventure begins." I threw my phone on the bed and focused on getting ready. Sarah, my late husband's sister, had arrived early to help. She'd driven 3 hours from Sacramento without hesitation when I called her. "Oh, Yvonne," she said, wrapping me in a tight hug. "Marcus would be heartbroken, but he'd be so angry at your family, too. I'm angry enough for both of us." Sarah helped me with my hair and made sure I ate something, even though food tasted like ash. She'd been my rock since Marcus died in that car accident 3 years ago, and now she was here again for another impossible goodbye. The funeral home was transformed with flowers and photos of Lucas. Mr. Jacobson had gone above and beyond, creating a beautiful display of Lucas's artwork and his beloved ocean books. His teachers had put together a memory board covered with pictures from field trips and class parties. Lucas's bright smile beamed from every photo, each one a knife to my heart. As the service time approached, people began arriving. Not my family, of course, but Lucas's other family, the one built from love rather than blood. His entire 4th grade class came dressed in their best clothes, clutching handmade cards and flowers picked from their gardens. Mrs. Chen had to keep wiping her eyes as she helped organize the children. Coach Martinez and the baseball team arrived in their uniforms, Lucas's jersey number displayed on their sleeves. They'd had special patches made in his honor. David and his mother came early, both with red-rimmed eyes. David handed me a small box. "Lucas and I were making these for our science project," he whispered. I finished his for him. Inside were 2 friendship bracelets made with beads that looked like tiny sea creatures. One spelled out Lucas and the other David. The gesture from this 10-year-old boy showed more thoughtfulness than my entire adult family had managed. Aunt Helen arrived with her husband and my cousins, all driving hours to be there. She took one look at me and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Your parents should be ashamed," she whispered. "Charlotte would be rolling in her grave if she knew how they're treating her granddaughter." The service was scheduled to start at 10. By 9:55, every seat was full except for the front row I'd reserved for my family. Those empty chairs seemed to mock me, broadcasting my abandonment to everyone present. At 10:05, Mr. Jacobson gently asked if I wanted to begin. I nodded, knowing no one else was coming. Just as I stood to speak, my phone vibrated. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. It was a text from Madison. "Hey, can you water my plants and get my mail while we're gone? The spare key is under the mat. Thanks. Oh, and the funeral home flowers are from all of us. Mom picked them out online." The casual cruelty of asking me to do favors while I was literally at my son's funeral was breathtaking. Sarah saw my face and gently took the phone from my hand. "Whatever it is can wait," she said firmly. "This is Lucas's time." I stood at the podium looking out at the faces of people who'd taken time from their lives to honor my son. Behind them, those empty chairs seemed to grow larger, but I pushed past the pain and began to speak. "Lucas would have been amazed to see all of you here." I began, my voice stronger than expected. He loved people, loved making friends, loved sharing his passion for the ocean with anyone who would listen. He wanted to be a marine biologist, specifically to study dolphins because he said they always looked like they were smiling. A few children giggled through their tears, remembering Lucas's dolphin obsession. I continued sharing stories of his curiosity, his kindness, how he'd spend his allowance on books about sea creatures instead of toys, how he'd insisted on catch and release when we went fishing because the fish have families too, Mom. Mrs. Chen spoke next, her voice wavering as she described Lucas's enthusiasm in class, how he'd volunteer to read his ocean reports first and always included hand-drawn illustrations. Several of his classmates read poems they'd written about their friend, their young voices bringing fresh tears to everyone's eyes. Coach Martinez talked about Lucas's determination on the baseball field, how he wasn't the most athletic kid, but had the biggest heart. He cheered louder for his teammates' successes than his own, the coach said. That's the kind of character you can't teach. Throughout the service, I kept glancing at those empty chairs, each look a fresh wound. My parents, who'd been there for every school play and baseball game when appearances mattered, couldn't be bothered to show up when I needed them most. Madison, who'd called me crying over every minor pregnancy symptom, thought my grief was too toxic for her baby. Tyler, who'd crashed on my couch for 6 months after college, couldn't miss a vacation for his nephew's funeral. As we prepared to leave for the cemetery, Aunt Helen pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something else," she said quietly. "I overheard your father on a call yesterday. He was talking about life insurance. Yvonne, did you know they had a policy on Lucas?" The ground shifted beneath my feet. I gripped her arm to steady myself. "What? No, that's not possible. I never signed anything." "I don't know the details, but you might want to look into it. The way he was talking, it wasn't right." I filed this information away, too overwhelmed to process it fully. We drove to the cemetery in a small procession, Sarah never leaving my side. The burial was private, just immediate family and close friends. Lucas's classmates had returned to school, but they'd each placed a small painted rock in a basket for me to leave at his grave. Each rock had an ocean creature and Lucas's name. As Mr. Jacobson prepared to lower the casket, I placed 3 things inside the teddy bear. He'd slept with a photo of him and Marcus together, and the unfinished Mother's Day craft he'd been working on for next year. He'd already written, "I love you to the bottom of the ocean and back," in his careful handwriting. The rain had stopped and a weak sun broke through the clouds as we said our final goodbyes. I threw the first handful of dirt onto the casket, the sound threatening to break me completely. Sarah held me as others followed suit, each person taking a moment to say goodbye to a little boy who'd touched their lives. After everyone left, I stayed behind with Sarah. We sat on a nearby bench watching the cemetery workers finish their job. My phone had been buzzing nonstop, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. "Your husband would be so proud of how you handled today," Sarah said softly. "And Lucas would have loved seeing all his friends here." "I just can't understand how they could do this," I whispered. "How do you choose a vacation over your grandchild's funeral? How does that compute in someone's mind?" "I don't think we're meant to understand people like that," Sarah replied. "Some people are just broken in ways that make them incapable of real love. The tragedy is that you and Lucas got caught in their orbit." As we finally prepared to leave, I took one last look at the fresh grave with its temporary marker. Tomorrow, my family would be boarding their cruise ship, laughing and taking photos, acting like Lucas had never existed. But today, this moment was about my son and the people who truly loved him. "I'll come by tomorrow," Sarah promised as she dropped me at home. "You shouldn't be alone." But I was alone as I walked into the house that still smelled like Lucas still held his laughter in its walls. His backpack hung on its hook by the door. His shoes were lined up neatly on the rack, the way I'd taught him. His cereal bowl from 3 mornings ago still sat in the dishwasher because I couldn't bear to run it and erase that last normal morning. I finally looked at my phone. 17 messages from my family, but not one expressing regret or offering comfort. They needed things: plant watering mail collection, alarm codes, garage door instructions. My mother had sent a detailed list of tasks to complete at their house while they were gone, ending with, "We'll bring you back a souvenir from the ship's gift shop." A souvenir. They thought a keychain or shot glass could make up for abandoning me at my son's funeral. I turned off my phone and curled up on Lucas's bed, breathing in his scent, wondering how I'd ever survived in a family that could be so cruel and calculating. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the empty house and the silence and the growing suspicion that Aunt Helen's revelation about life insurance was just the beginning of discovering how deep my family's betrayal really went. 3 days after the funeral, I found myself standing in Madison's perfectly organized kitchen, watering her collection of succulents. Despite every instinct screaming at me to ignore her request, I couldn't let innocent plants die because their owner was heartless. That's what separated me from my family, I supposed. I still cared about living things. Madison's mail was piling up in her decorative box, mostly advertisements and baby catalogs. I sorted through them mindlessly until a thick envelope from Prudential Life caught my eye. The return address indicated it was from their claims department. My hands trembled as I held it, Aunt Helen's words echoing in my mind. I shouldn't open it. It was a federal crime to open someone else's mail. But something told me this envelope held answers to questions I was afraid to ask. I set it aside and continued my duties, but it seemed to pulse with dark possibility on Madison's marble countertop. Unable to resist, I looked around her house for more information. Madison had always been careless with important documents, leaving them scattered on her desk. Sure enough, her home office was a goldmine of paperwork. Among the pregnancy pamphlets and cruise brochures, I found a folder labeled Family Insurance. My blood ran cold as I opened it. Inside were multiple policies, all taken out by my parents. There was one on Madison, one on Tyler, one on each of Madison's unborn twins already, and there, at the bottom, was Lucas's policy. $50,000 taken out 8 months ago with my parents listed as sole beneficiaries. But that wasn't the worst part. Paperclip to Lucas's policy was a letter from the insurance company dated 1 week ago, 2 days after Lucas died, confirming that the claim had been filed and approved for expedited processing. My parents had filed for the death benefit while I was still trying to choose a casket. I photographed every document with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. Then I found something else that made my stomach heave. A printed email exchange between my father and the insurance agent dated the day Lucas was hospitalized. Given the severity of the situation, what's the timeline for claim processing? My father had written. We have some time-sensitive financial commitments. The agent's response was professional but clear. Upon receipt of the death certificate, claims are typically processed within 5 to 7 business days. My father's reply, sent while I was sitting beside Lucas's hospital bed praying for a miracle. Good to know. We'll be in touch. I barely made it to Madison's powder room before I vomited the reality of their premeditation overwhelming me. They'd known Lucas was dying and immediately started planning how to profit from it. The cruise wasn't booked months in advance. It was booked with the expectation of a windfall from my son's death. I left Madison's house in a daze and drove to my parents' home. They'd given me their alarm code and garage door opener, trusting me to check on things while they sailed the Caribbean. Their mail was even more revealing. There was a confirmation from the cruise line showing the booking date exactly as Aunt Helen had said 3 days after Lucas was hospitalized. The payment method was listed as pending insurance settlement. In my father's office, I found more horror. A filing cabinet contained policies on my grandparents, both deceased, on 3 great-aunts who'd all died within the past decade, and even one on Marcus. My husband's policy had paid out $75,000 to my parents, not to me, his wife. I'd never seen a penny of it and hadn't even known it existed. The dates were damning. Each policy was taken out within a year of the person's death. My father had spreadsheets tracking premium payments against expected payouts, treating our family members like investment opportunities. One column was labeled ROI, Return on Investment. Lucas's name was already added to the completed transactions like he was just another successful venture. I thought I might vomit again, but rage was replacing nausea. These people had raised me, had pretended to love me and my son, all while calculating our monetary value. How many family funerals had they attended while secretly celebrating their incoming windfall? I needed professional help to understand the full scope of this. I drove to the office of Jennifer Morrison, an attorney who'd helped with Marcus's estate. She'd been kind and thorough, and I trusted her judgment. Her assistant squeezed me in for an emergency appointment when I mentioned potential insurance fraud. Jennifer's expression grew increasingly grim as I showed her the photographed documents. She made notes, asked careful questions, and finally set down her pen with a heavy sigh. Yvonne, this is extensive insurance fraud. Taking out policies without the knowledge or consent of the insured party's guardians is illegal. Your parents forged your signature on Lucas's policy. See here, This is supposed to be your consent as his mother." I stared at the signature that looked nothing like mine. They hadn't even tried to make it convincing. "What about Marcus's policy?" "That's more complicated since spouses can legally take out policies on each other. But your parents weren't his spouse. If they represented themselves as having insurable interest they didn't actually have, that's fraud, too. Yvonne, with your permission, I'd like to contact a colleague who specializes in insurance fraud. This appears to be a pattern spanning decades." I gave my consent, feeling like I was in a nightmare that kept getting worse. Jennifer made copies of everything and promised to investigate immediately. As I prepared to leave, she stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask. Your husband's death was ruled an accident. Given what we're seeing here, do you have any reason to believe—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The thought had already poisoned my mind the moment I saw Marcus's policy. "His brakes failed on a clear day with a well-maintained car," I said numbly. "The mechanic said it was unusual but not impossible. Just terrible luck." Jennifer's expression said what we were both thinking. Maybe it wasn't luck at all. I drove home in a fog, the true horror of my situation sinking in. My family hadn't just abandoned me in my time of need. They were vultures who had possibly murdered my husband and celebrated my son's death as a financial opportunity. Every memory I had was now tainted. Every birthday, every holiday, every moment they'd pretended to love us while calculating our worth in dollars and cents. That evening, while my family was presumably enjoying their first night at sea, I sat surrounded by photo albums. There was Madison holding newborn Lucas, smiling at the camera. Had she known about the insurance policy when she took that photo? There were my parents at Lucas's 5th birthday party helping him blow out candles. Were they already planning to profit from his death? I found a photo from last Christmas. Lucas on my father's lap, both of them laughing at something on TV. 8 months later, Lucas was dead, and my father was more concerned about claim processing than comforting me. The photo trembled in my hands as rage built in my chest. My phone rang, startling me. It was Tyler calling from the ship. Background noise indicated he was at a party. "Hey, Yvonne, just wanted to check in. Did you get Mom's plants watered?" The casualness of his tone calling about plants while I just discovered they'd all conspired to profit from my son's death was too much. "Tyler, did you know about the life insurance policy on Lucas?" There was a pause. Music thumped in the background. "What, I can't hear you. We're at the welcome party. I'll call you when we get back." He hung up before I could respond. A moment later, I received a text from Madison. "Tyler said you're asking about insurance. Don't go snooping in my house, just water the plants and leave." So they all knew. Every single one of them had known and kept it from me. I thought about calling them back, screaming the truth at them, but what was the point? They were literally partying on a ship, paid for with my son's death benefit. Instead, I called Sarah. She came over immediately, bringing wine and tissues. When I showed her what I'd discovered, she had to sit down heavily on my couch. "Oh my God, Yvonne, this is monstrous. They're monsters." "What do I do? They're my family. They're all I have left." "No," Sarah said firmly. "They're not your family. Family doesn't do this. Family doesn't profit from your child's death. Family doesn't celebrate while you bury your 10-year-old son alone." We talked until late into the night, Sarah helping me process the unprocessable. She stayed in the guest room, unwilling to leave me alone with such devastating revelations. As I lay in bed, I could hear the ocean sound machine in Lucas's room still playing because I couldn't bear to turn it off. He'd loved falling asleep to those sounds, dreaming of the ocean adventures he'd never get to have. Tomorrow, I'd have to decide what to do with the information I'd uncovered. Tonight, I just had to survive the knowledge that the people who were supposed to love me most had been waiting for my son to die so they could go on vacation. The cruelty of it was suffocating, but beneath the pain, a cold fury was building. They thought they'd gotten away with it sailing into the sunset while I grieved alone. They were wrong. The next morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt since Lucas died. Rage had crystallized into determination overnight. I sat at my kitchen table with Sarah, strong coffee, and Jennifer Morrison on speakerphone. My attorney had worked through the night with her insurance fraud specialist colleague, and their findings were staggering. Yvonne, we've identified at least 12 policies your parents fraudulently obtained over the past 20 years, Jennifer explained. The pattern is clear and deliberate. They target family members with health conditions or high-risk factors, wait for what they consider an appropriate time, and then cash in. What about Marcus? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. We've contacted the detective who handled his accident. Given this new information, they're reopening the case. The mechanic who inspected the car noted that the brake line appeared to have been cleanly cut, not worn through. It was dismissed at the time as a manufacturing defect. Sarah gripped my hand as I absorbed this. My parents hadn't just celebrated my husband's death, they'd likely caused it. Lucas and I had been living with his killers, eating Sunday dinners with them, accepting their hollow condolences while they counted their blood money. What's our next step? I managed to ask. We file charges for insurance fraud first. That's clear-cut with the forged signatures. The murder investigation will take longer, but the insurance fraud will be enough to start federal proceedings. Yvonne, are you prepared for this? Once we start, there's no going back. Your family will be arrested. They stopped being my family when they chose a cruise over my son's funeral, I said firmly. File everything. Jennifer promised to have paperwork ready by the afternoon. After we hung up, Sarah and I strategized. The cruise lasted 7 days. I had 4 more days to gather evidence before they returned, 4 days to prepare for the confrontation that would destroy them. I spent that day becoming a detective in my own life. I returned to my parents' house and systematically photographed every document in my father's filing cabinet. I found receipts for the cruise showing the deposit was paid the day the insurance company confirmed Lucas's claim would be expedited. I discovered printed Google searches from my father's browser history, including how long does brake fluid take to drain and accidental death insurance payout timeline. The evidence was damning, but I wanted more. I wanted to understand the full scope of their monstrosity. In my mother's craft room, I found her diary. She'd always been an obsessive journaler, and her entries about Lucas made me sick. The boy's asthma is getting worse. She'd written 6 months ago. Robert thinks we should increase the policy amount before it becomes a pre-existing condition issue. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I remember we're not causing anything to happen. We're just being prepared. Another entry from the week Lucas died. Yvonne called crying about Lucas being in the hospital. Robert already checked with the cruise line about last-minute bookings. I know it seems cold, but we've been planning this vacation for so long I had to laugh at her own lie. The boy has been sickly since birth. It's not our fault nature is taking its course. I photographed every incriminating page, my hands steady despite the horror. My mother had convinced herself they weren't murderers, just opportunists. The distinction was meaningless when the result was my son in the ground and them on a ship. That evening, Tyler posted a video on Instagram from the cruise. He was drunk laughing with his girlfriend at a comedy show. In the background, I could see my parents and Madison all smiling without a care in the world. Madison was showing off her baby bump to other passengers, probably spinning tales about her excitement for motherhood while her nephew lay in a fresh grave. The comments on the video were from friends congratulating them on the vacation, saying how much they deserved to relax. One comment made me pause. "So sorry to hear about your family emergency. Glad you could still make the trip." Family emergency. That's how they were spinning Lucas's death to save face, a minor inconvenience they'd overcome to still enjoy their blood money cruise. I called Aunt Helen that night, needing to talk to someone who'd known my parents before they became monsters. She answered immediately, having been worried about me. "I've been thinking about calling you," she said. "Yvonne, I'm so angry I could spit. Your grandmother would be horrified by their behavior." "Did you know about the insurance policies?" There was a long pause. I suspected. After my mother died, your father asked a lot of questions about her life insurance, seemed disappointed when he learned she'd cashed it out for her cancer treatment. I started noticing a pattern: family members dying and your parents suddenly having money for renovations or vacations. Why didn't you say anything? What could I say? That I suspected my brother was profiting from death? I had no proof, just an ugly feeling. I'm sorry, Yvonne. I should have warned you. We talked for another hour, Helen, filling in pieces of family history that took on sinister new meaning. The cousin who died in a hiking accident just months after my parents visited him. The great-aunt whose medication had been mysteriously switched, leading to a fatal interaction. Each death had seemed isolated tragic, but not suspicious. Together they painted a picture of serial killers who used insurance forms instead of weapons. Over the next 3 days, I built my case with Jennifer's guidance. We documented everything, created timelines, gathered witness statements. Sarah never left my side, making sure I ate and slept. The funeral home director, Mr. Jacobson, provided a statement about the unusual lack of family presence. The insurance company began their own investigation once Jennifer submitted the fraud evidence. Tyler's girlfriend, Brittany, turned out to be an unexpected ally. She called me from the ship, drunk and crying. "I'm so sorry about your son," she sobbed. "I didn't know he'd just died. Tyler told me the funeral was weeks ago. I would never have come if I'd known. This is so fucked up." She revealed that my family had been acting strangely on the cruise. My father kept checking his phone for bank deposits. Madison had bought thousands of dollars in designer baby clothes, charging them to my parents' room. My mother had booked spa treatments every day, joking about finally being able to afford the luxury she deserved. "They're acting like they won the lottery," Brittany said. "Now I know why. I'm breaking up with Tyler as soon as we dock. This is sick." I thanked her for her honesty and added her statement to our growing pile of evidence. By the time my family's cruise ship was heading back to port, we were ready. Jennifer had coordinated with federal investigators who would be waiting at the dock. I had copies of everything backup stored in multiple locations. The house of cards my parents had built on the bones of our family was about to collapse. The night before they returned, I stood in Lucas's room one more time. His collection of ocean books still lined the shelves. His drawings still decorated the walls. He'd never grow up to be the marine biologist he'd dreamed of becoming, never swim with dolphins or discover new species in the deep. But I would make sure his death meant something. I would get justice for him and Marcus and all the family members who'd been reduced to dollar signs in my parents' ledgers. "I'm going to make them pay, baby," I whispered to his empty room. "They thought they could profit from losing you, but they're about to lose everything." Tomorrow the confrontation would begin. They'd dock expecting to return to their normal lives, maybe hand me a souvenir and ask if I'd gotten over my grief yet. Instead, they'd find that their carefully constructed scheme had unraveled, and the daughter they'd dismissed as too strong to need support had become their worst nightmare. I smiled grimly as I turned off Lucas's ocean sounds for the first time since he'd died. The waves had soothed me through my darkest nights, but tomorrow I would become the tsunami that destroyed everything my family had built on the graves of those who'd loved them. The morning my family was due to return from their cruise, I positioned myself strategically. Jennifer had advised me to let them come to me rather than meeting them at the port where federal agents would be waiting. I wanted to see their tanned, relaxed faces when they realized their vacation was the last peaceful moment they'd ever have. By 2 p.m, I heard cars pulling into my driveway. They'd come straight to my house, not even bothering to drop their luggage at home first. Through the window, I watched them emerge from Tyler's SUV, all golden tans and casual clothes. Madison's baby bump was more pronounced, displayed proudly in a tight sundress that probably cost more than Lucas's funeral flowers. They didn't knock. My mother used her spare key, calling out cheerfully as they entered my home, like they hadn't abandoned me in my darkest hour. "Yvonne, we're back. Where are you, sweetheart?" The false endearment made my skin crawl. I stayed in the living room, letting them come to me. They filed in with shopping bags and bright smiles, my mother carrying a gift shop bag that presumably held my consolation prize. "There you are," Mom exclaimed, moving to hug me. I stepped back and her smile faltered. "What's wrong? Are you still upset about the funeral?" "Honey, we talked about this. You need to move forward." "The cruise was amazing." Madison interrupted, rubbing her belly. "The baby loved all the food. Oh, I brought you something." She pulled out a ceramic dolphin about 3 inches tall, the kind of mass-produced trinket found in every port gift shop. Since Lucas loved ocean stuff, I thought this would be nice for his room. The casualness of giving me a cheap dolphin to memorialize my dead son made Sarah, who was sitting quietly in the corner, audibly gasp. My family finally noticed her presence. "Sarah," my father said coldly, "I didn't realize you were here. Family meeting time." "She is family," I said, my voice steady. "More than any of you have been. Sit down, all of you." Something in my tone must have penetrated their vacation haze because they exchanged glances before settling onto my furniture. Tyler looked uncomfortable, probably because Brittany had broken up with him at the port as promised. Good. "So dramatic," Mom muttered, but she sat. "I need to see Lucas's room," Madison announced. "I want to get ideas for the nursery, and since he won't be needing his furniture anymore..." The rage I'd been controlling threatened to explode. My dead son's bed wasn't even cold, and she was already redecorating with it in her mind. "Actually, that's why you're here," I said calmly. "We need to discuss Lucas's things, and Marcus's things, and Grandma Ellen's things, and Cousin Jeffrey's things. Should I continue?" My father's tan seemed to fade slightly. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the 12 life insurance policies you've fraudulently taken out over the past 20 years. I'm talking about the $50,000 you collected on my 10-year-old son before his body was even buried. I'm talking about murder, Dad." The silence was deafening. Madison's hand froze on her belly. Tyler shifted nervously. My mother's practiced smile finally slipped. "You're grieving," Mom said carefully. "You're not thinking clearly. Why don't we come back when you're more rational?" "Oh, I'm perfectly rational. I have copies of everything. Every forged signature, every policy document, every email discussing claim processing while my son was dying. Jennifer Morrison. You remember her. She helped with Marcus's estate. She found it all very interesting. So did the federal investigators." "Federal investigators," Tyler squeaked. "Insurance fraud across state lines is a federal crime," Sarah said from her corner. "But you all knew that, didn't you?" My father stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're having some kind of breakdown. We're leaving." "I wouldn't do that," I said. "In fact, I'm surprised you made it this far. I expected you to be arrested at the port." As if on cue, my doorbell rang. Through the window, we could all see the black federal vehicles outside. My family turned to stare at me, their vacation glow replaced by dawning horror. "You called the police on your own family," Madison whispered. "No, I called the police on criminals who profit from murdering family members. You just happen to be related to me." The federal agents entered with professional calm. Agent Martinez, whom I'd met with Jennifer, showed her badge and began reading rights. My mother started crying, mascara running down her cheeks. Not tears for Lucas or Marcus or any of the family members they'd killed, but tears for herself. "Yvonne, please," she begged as handcuffs were produced. "We're your parents. How can you do this? How could you celebrate on a cruise while I buried my son alone?" I shot back. "How could you forge my signature to profit from his death? How could you plan Marcus's murder?" "We didn't kill anyone," my father protested as Agent Martinez cuffed him. "The insurance policies were just financial planning that coincidentally paid out right before vacations and renovations," Agent Chen said, reviewing her notes. "Mr. Morrison, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. We'll be adding more charges as the investigation continues." Madison was sobbing now, clutching her belly. "I'm pregnant. You can't arrest a pregnant woman. This stress is bad for my babies." "Maybe you should have thought about that before becoming an accessory to fraud," I said coldly. "Oh, and Jordan knows everything. He's filing for divorce and custody. Turns out he doesn't want his children raised by criminals." That broke her completely. She wailed as a female agent carefully arrested her, mindful of her condition, but not swayed by it. Tyler went quietly, his head hanging. As they were led out, he looked back at me. "I'm sorry about Lucas," he said quietly. "I didn't know I just thought it was weird timing." "But you knew about the insurance and said nothing," I replied. "Your silence makes you complicit." As the agents led my family away, neighbors gathered on their lawns to watch the spectacle. Mrs. Patterson from next door caught my eye and nodded approvingly. She'd been at Lucas's funeral, had seen the empty family chairs. Sometimes the neighborhood knows more than we think. My mother made one last attempt as she was placed in the vehicle. "Yvonne, remember, I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. And then you spent 20 years planning how to profit from my death," I called back. "The only reason I'm alive is because you couldn't forge a policy on an adult who'd notice." The vehicles pulled away, taking my biological family to face justice. Sarah wrapped her arms around me as I finally let myself cry, not from sadness, but from release. The weight I'd carried since discovering their crimes lifted slightly. Inside, on my coffee table, sat the ceramic dolphin Madison had brought. I picked it up, feeling its cheap weight, noting the Made in China sticker on the bottom. This was what they thought my son's life was worth. A $3 trinket from a cruise ship gift shop. I threw it against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces. Each shard seemed to represent a family member who'd chosen greed over love, vacation over compassion, money over my son's memory. Sarah helped me clean up the pieces, neither of us speaking. Some things were too big for words. That evening, as news of the arrests spread through town, I received dozens of calls and messages. Support from Lucas's teachers, his friends' parents, the baseball team. The community that had shown up for his funeral was showing up again, proving that family isn't always blood. Jennifer called with an update. They're being held without bail given the flight risk and severity of the charges. The investigation is expanding. Yvonne, they found evidence of 3 more policies we didn't know about. Your parents were planning to take out one on you next year when you turned 35. I hung up, feeling hollow. They'd been planning my death while smiling at Sunday dinners. Every "I love you" had been a lie, every family gathering a twisted actuarial assessment. But Lucas hadn't known any of that. He died believing in the love of grandparents who saw him as an investment opportunity. That night, I sat in his room again, surrounded by his ocean books and dolphin posters. "They're going to pay baby," I whispered. "Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Madison and Uncle Tyler, they're all going to pay for what they did to you and Daddy." Tomorrow would bring lawyers and trials and more horrible revelations. But tonight, I had something I hadn't had since finding those insurance papers, hope for justice. My family thought they'd gotten away with murder, literally and figuratively. They were wrong. And somewhere I hoped Lucas and Marcus were watching as their killers finally faced consequences for their greed. 2 weeks after the arrests, I sat in Jennifer Morrison's conference room, surrounded by boxes of evidence. The federal investigation had exploded beyond even our worst expectations. Agent Martinez and her team had uncovered a web of fraud spanning 3 states and 2 decades. "Your parents were methodical," Agent Martinez explained, spreading documents across the table. "They researched each victim, carefully learned about pre-existing conditions, and timed the policies perfectly. Your son's asthma made him a target from birth." I stared at Lucas's baby pictures in the file taken by my parents at the hospital. Even then, as they cooed over their grandson, they'd been calculating his monetary value. What about Marcus? The reopened investigation found brake fluid on your father's tools in the garage. He claims it was from maintaining his own vehicle, but the timeline doesn't match. Marcus's accident occurred 2 days after your father purchased the fluid. My hands clenched into fists. They'd smiled at our wedding, given toasts about family and love, then murdered my husband for $75,000. Jennifer shuffled through her papers. There's something else. We served them with papers for both criminal and civil charges. The civil suit includes emotional distress, wrongful death, and fraud. Your parents' attorney reached out. They want to negotiate. Negotiate, Sarah, who'd accompanied me to every meeting, scoffed. They killed her husband and celebrated her son's death with a cruise. What's to negotiate? They're scared. Jennifer said simply. "The federal charges alone carry 20 to 30 years. Your mother is 71, your father 73. This is essentially a life sentence. They want to offer information in exchange for reduced charges." What information could they possibly have that matters more than justice for Lucas and Marcus? Jennifer and Agent Martinez exchanged glances. Tyler provided something interesting during his interrogation. He's been more cooperative than the others, seems genuinely remorseful. She placed an old tablet on the table. "This belonged to your father. Tyler knew the password and gave it to us. Yvonne, there are recordings on here. Your father documented everything." My blood ran cold. What kind of recordings? Conversations, planning sessions, even some incidents. He was paranoid about your mother betraying him, so he recorded their schemes, including discussions about Marcus's accident and plans for what they called the Lucas situation. I couldn't breathe. Sarah grabbed my hand as Agent Martinez pulled up a file. "Are you sure you want to hear this? It's damning evidence, but it's also your parents discussing your son's death like a business transaction." I nodded, steeling myself. The recording started my father's voice filling the room. "The boy's getting sicker. Doctor says his asthma is severe." "Good," my mother's voice replied casually. "The worse his condition, the less suspicious it looks. We wait until he's about 10, maybe 11. Old enough that we've gotten our money's worth in premiums, young enough that no one suspects anything." "What about Yvonne?" "She's always been too emotional. She'll fall apart, but she's strong. She'll survive. Besides, once we collect on Lucas, we can start planning for her. 35 is a good age, statistically speaking." The recording continued, but I couldn't hear it over the roaring in my ears. They'd planned my son's death when he was barely walking. Every birthday party, every Christmas, every time they'd played with him had been a lie. "There's more," Agent Martinez said gently. "Tyler recorded some conversations too, starting about 6 months ago when he began suspecting something was wrong." The next recording was from the cruise ship. I recognized the background noise from Tyler's Instagram videos. "I can't believe Yvonne had the nerve to guilt trip us." Madison's voice slurred drunkenly. "Like we caused Lucas's death or something." "Well, technically," Tyler's voice started. "Don't even joke about that," my father snapped. "The inhaler tampering was never proven. For all anyone knows, it was a defective product." My world tilted. Inhaler tampering. Agent Martinez paused the recording. "We had Lucas's inhaler tested after this. There were traces of an irritant that would have made an asthma attack worse, not better. It appears someone replaced the medication with something designed to trigger respiratory distress." I vomited into the wastebasket Jennifer quickly provided. My parents hadn't just profited from Lucas's death, they'd caused it. They'd sent my baby to a sleepover with a tampered inhaler, knowing he'd have an attack, knowing it would kill him. "Tyler didn't know about this part," Agent Martinez continued. "His cooperation and recordings are the only reason we can prove premeditation. He's agreed to testify against the others in exchange for a reduced sentence." Reduced sentence. I wiped my mouth rage, replacing nausea. He knew they were killing family members and said nothing. He was 24 when he figured it out, financially dependent on them and scared. He's not innocent, but he's also somewhat a victim. He's provided evidence on 6 other family deaths we're now investigating as homicides. The rest of the meeting blurred together. More recordings, more evidence, more horror. Madison had helped research insurance policies, though she claimed ignorance about the murders. She'd thought they were just committing fraud, not killing people. As if that made it better. By the time we left Jennifer's office, I felt hollowed out. Sarah drove me home while I stared at nothing, trying to process that my parents had murdered my son with a doctored inhaler. "Tyler wants to see you," Jennifer had said before we left. "He's out on bail with an ankle monitor. He says he has something of Lucas's you should have." I'd refused. I couldn't face any of them yet, maybe ever. But that night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I wondered what Tyler had. Something of Lucas's that my parents had hidden. Another piece of evidence. The next morning brought a circus of media attention. Insurance murder family was trending nationally. Reporters camped outside my house until Sarah chased them off with threats of restraining orders. My phone rang nonstop with interview requests, book deals, movie offers, vultures of a different kind profiting from tragedy. I turned them all down and focused on the legal proceedings. The federal prosecutor, Amanda Chen, was brilliant and ruthless. She walked me through the charges, each one carrying years in prison. With the murder charges added to the fraud, your parents are looking at life without parole. Madison might get 25 to 30 years. Tyler's cooperation could get him down to 5 to 10. What about the other victims' families? We're contacting everyone. Some cases are too old to prosecute, but the families deserve to know. Your Aunt Helen has been particularly helpful in tracking down relatives. That evening, Tyler appeared at my door. I almost didn't answer, but something in his expression through the window made me relent. He looked haggard, aged 10 years in 2 weeks. "I know you hate me," he started. "I don't hate you, Tyler. I nothing you. You're nothing to me now." He flinched but pulled a small box from his pocket. "This was in Dad's safe. I think Lucas would want you to have it." Inside was a USB drive labeled Lucas Project. "Dad had cameras in your house," Tyler said quietly. He recorded Lucas all the time looking for weakness to exploit. But this file, it's just Lucas being Lucas. Hours of him playing, reading, talking about the ocean. Dad meant it for evil, but it's all I could save of him for you. I took the drive with trembling hands. Tyler turned to leave, then stopped. "I know it doesn't matter, but I loved him. Lucas. I loved him and I let them kill him because I was a coward. I'll testify. I'll tell everything. I'll spend whatever time in prison they give me. But I needed you to know that someone in our family actually loved your son." He left before I could respond. That night, I plugged in the USB drive and found exactly what he'd promised. Hours of video of Lucas just living his life, reading his ocean books, drawing whales, telling Marcus about his day at school. My parents had meant to study him like a lab rat, but instead they'd captured the pure joy of a little boy who loved life. I watched until dawn, crying and laughing and remembering. In one video, Lucas looked directly at the hidden camera and waved. "Hi, Grandpa's secret camera," he chirped. "I know you're there. Mommy says you like to watch me because you love me. I love you too." Even in their surveillance, he'd found love. That was Lucas always seeing the best in people who didn't deserve it. I saved every video, backed them up in multiple places. These weren't the memories I'd chosen to record, but they were precious. Nonetheless, the trial was set to begin in 3 months. I had that long to prepare to steel myself for facing them in court, but I also had that long to figure out how to honor Lucas's memory beyond just seeking justice. He'd wanted to save the oceans. Maybe I could save other children from grandparents who saw them as dollar signs instead of family. The ceramic dolphin pieces still sat in a bag in my closet. I'd kept them, not sure why. Now I knew. They were evidence of how little my family valued Lucas's life. $3 in a gift shop, $50,000 in insurance money. Both equally obscene prices for a little boy who was priceless. Tyler's decision to fully cooperate with authorities opened floodgates of information we never expected. 3 days after he gave me the USB drive, Agent Martinez called an emergency meeting. Tyler would be there wearing a wire for the past week, and what he'd uncovered changed everything. I sat across from my brother in the federal building's conference room, Sarah beside me, and attorneys filling the remaining chairs. Tyler looked terrible, hollow-eyed and thin, the weight of his complicity eating at him visibly. "Before we begin," Agent Martinez said, "Tyler has been recording conversations with your parents in Madison from jail. They don't know he's cooperating. What you're about to hear is disturbing." Tyler spoke first, his voice barely audible. "I went to see them separately, pretended I was trying to coordinate our defense. Dad thought I was still on their side." The first recording was from the county jail, Tyler visiting our father. "They can't prove anything about the inhaler," Dad's voice said confidently. I was careful. Wore gloves replaced it weeks before. Even if they test it, the residue could be from anywhere. But they found your searches about respiratory irritants, Tyler prompted. Circumstantial. I have allergies. I was researching for myself. What about Marcus? A pause. What about him? Come on, Dad, it's just us. I need to know what I'm defending. Another pause, then a chuckle that made my skin crawl. That boy was too trusting. Told me he was taking the car in for service, even gave me his spare keys in case he needed a ride. Simple matter of waiting until the night before. Brake fluid drains fast when you know where to cut. I gripped Sarah's hand hard enough to hurt. Hearing him admit it so casually, like he was discussing changing oil instead of murdering my husband, was devastating. How many others, Dad? Why do you want to know? Because I'm your son. Because I'm facing prison. Because I deserve to understand what I'm part of. Pride crept into our father's voice. 17 successful claims over 22 years. Your mother wanted to stop at 10, but the money was too good. Do you know what retirement costs these days? 17 family members. 17 people who'd trusted them, loved them, died for their retirement fund. Tyler switched off that recording. Mom was worse, he said quietly. The next recording was Madison and our mother in the women's facility. I can't believe Yvonne did this to us, Madison whined. My babies need their grandmother. Your babies need their inheritance more, Mom replied coldly. Though that's gone now, thanks to your sister's dramatics. Maybe she'll forgive us eventually, for the twins' sake. Mom laughed a sound I'd never heard before, cruel and calculating. Yvonne was always too soft. That's why we had to handle Lucas ourselves. She'd never have the stomach for what needed to be done. But you said his death was natural. Oh, Madison, still so naive. Nothing about our family finances has been natural for 20 years. Your grandfather's heart attack helped along. Cousin Jeffrey's allergic reaction, peanut oil in his coffee creamer, Aunt Dolores's fall down the stairs. She was pushed. Madison's gasp sounded genuine. You killed Grandpa. Your grandfather was 82 and mean as a snake. His death gave us the seed money for everything else. He'd have approved honestly. He always said family was just another word for obligation. The recording continued with Mom detailing murders like grocery lists. Each family member had been carefully researched their deaths, designed to look natural or accidental. She showed no remorse, only pride in their efficiency. But Lucas was just a little boy, Madison protested weakly. A sick little boy who would have cost more in medical bills than he was worth. The insurance money will give your twins a better life. That's what family does, Madison. Sacrifices for the next generation. Agent Martinez stopped the recording there. Madison had apparently ended the visit immediately after possibly realizing for the first time that she'd been an accessory to serial murder, not just fraud. Tyler came to us after that recording, Agent Martinez explained. He's provided passwords, bank records, everything. We've traced payments to 16 different insurance companies across state lines. Your parents were running a murder-for-profit enterprise disguised as a family. Tyler finally looked at me directly. There's more. About you. My stomach dropped. What about me? He pulled out a notebook, his hands shaking. I found this in Dad's office months ago. It's why I started recording. Inside were detailed notes about my life, my daily routines, my health history, my coffee preferences, my jogging routes, pages of surveillance documenting when I was alone, when I was vulnerable. At the top of one page in my father's handwriting, why, 35th birthday, Marcus precedent established, single mother accident. They'd been planning my murder for my 35th birthday just 6 months away. They were going to make it look like you had an accident devastated by grief, Tyler explained. Dad had already researched your life insurance options, $2 million policy naming them as beneficiaries to care for any future grandchildren. But I would never name them. They were going to forge it like all the others. After you were dead, who would know? The room spun. I'd been living on borrowed time, my parents watching me like a hawk circling dying prey. Every family dinner had been reconnaissance. Every concerned check-in after Lucas's death had been assessing my vulnerability. "Why didn't you warn me?" I asked Tyler, my voice cracking. "Because I was a coward," he said simply. "Because I was scared they'd kill me too if I interfered. Because I convinced myself I was gathering evidence first. Pick your excuse. They're all inadequate." Agent Chen, the federal prosecutor, spoke up. "Tyler's cooperation has been invaluable. We're recommending 5 years minimum security with possibility of early release. His recordings and testimony will ensure your parents never leave prison. 5 years for letting them kill my son. 5 years for being young, scared, and eventually doing the right thing," she corrected. "Without Tyler, we'd have fraud charges, but no murder confessions. He's the reason we can get justice for all 17 victims." I wanted to hate him, but looking at my baby brother, I saw the 10-year-old who'd cried when our goldfish died. He'd been raised by sociopaths taught that family was about profit margins. The miracle was that he'd found a conscience at all. "What about Madison?" I asked. "She's claiming ignorance of the murders," Tyler said. "But I have recordings of her helping research victims' medical histories. She knew they were targeting sick family members, even if she convinced herself they were just waiting for natural deaths." "The twins?" I realized with horror. She was pregnant when they were planning murders. "She justified it as securing her baby's futures," Tyler said. "Just like Mom taught her. The cycle would have continued." We spent 3 more hours reviewing evidence. Tyler had been thorough once he'd decided to cooperate. Financial records showing payments for the cruise made while Lucas was dying. Email drafts discussing the timeline for my death. Shopping lists including brake fluid and latex gloves beside groceries. The most damning evidence was a family photo from last Thanksgiving. All of us around the table, Lucas on my lap, Marcus carving turkey. In the margin, my father had written notes. M. Brake line January. L. Inhaler December. Y. Accident after grieving period. We'd been cataloged for death while passing mashed potatoes. "There's one more thing," Tyler said as the meeting ended. He handed me a sealed envelope. "Lucas gave this to me last year for my birthday. I never opened it because I knew what my family was and I didn't deserve his innocence. But you should have it." Inside was a handmade card with Lucas's careful printing. "Happy birthday, Uncle Tyler. Thank you for teaching me to throw a baseball. When I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Tyler broke down completely. He thought I was brave. I let them kill him, and he thought I was brave. I found myself comforting my brother while holding my son's card. The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler had finally found the bravery Lucas always saw in him, just too late to save the nephew who'd believed in him. "Testify," I said firmly. "Tell every ugly truth. Make sure they never hurt anyone again. That's how you honor Lucas now." He nodded through his tears, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw my real brother. Not the coward who'd stayed silent or the accomplice who'd looked away, but the young man who'd finally chosen justice over family loyalty. As we left the federal building, reporters swarmed. Tyler walked directly into them, no longer hiding. "My name is Tyler Morrison," he said clearly. "I'm here to confess my role in my family's crimes and to ensure my parents face justice for murdering 17 innocent family members, including my 10-year-old nephew, Lucas. I was a coward who stayed silent, but I won't be silent anymore." The questions came rapid fire, but Tyler answered each one honestly. He implicated himself, fully admitted his failures, and provided details that would make headlines for weeks. But more importantly, he restored names and dignity to 17 victims who'd been reduced to insurance claims. That night, I added Lucas's birthday card to my growing collection of memories. My son had seen good in everyone, even in an uncle who'd failed him. Maybe that's how I'd honor him, not just with justice, but with the hope that people could choose to be better than their worst moments. The trial would start soon, and with Tyler's testimony, convictions were certain. But tonight, I held my son's card and tried to see the world through his eyes one more time. A world where Uncle Tyler was brave, where grandparents loved without calculation, where families protected instead of profited from each other. Tomorrow I'd return to the harsh reality. Tonight I'd let Lucas's innocent faith in human goodness guide me towards something better than revenge. Justice, yes, but also the possibility of redemption for the only family member who'd finally chosen truth over blood money. The call came at 3 a.m, 2 weeks before the trial was set to begin. Madison had been rushed to the hospital from jail, experiencing complications with her pregnancy. Despite everything, I found myself driving to the hospital, some vestige of sisterly concern overriding my anger. I found her handcuffed to a hospital bed, 2 guards outside her door. She looked terrible pale and swollen fear replacing her usual smugness. When she saw me, tears immediately started flowing. "Yvonne, thank God. I've been asking for you for hours. Please, I need to talk to you." "You have 5 minutes," I said coldly. "I didn't know," she whispered urgently. "I swear on my baby's lives I didn't know they were killing people. I thought we were just taking advantage of situations that would happen anyway." "You helped research medical histories. You knew about Lucas's asthma. For insurance approval, I thought we were being smart about premiums. When Mom said Lucas would probably die young from his condition, I thought she meant statistically not that they would." She broke down completely, monitors beeping as her blood pressure spiked. A nurse rushed in, checking readings and warning her to calm down. "Please," Madison begged after the nurse left. "Jordan's divorcing me. He's taking the twins when they're born. My own babies won't know me because I'll be in prison. I need you to know the truth." Something in her voice made me sit down. "Then tell me everything." What followed was 2 hours of confession that painted a different picture than I'd assumed. Madison had been groomed from birth to see insurance as investment, death as opportunity. Our parents had started her education early, having her help with paperwork when family members died, praising her for finding loopholes and discounts. "When Grandma died, I was 12, Madison recalled. "Mom had me write the thank you cards for funeral flowers while she filed the insurance claim. She said it was teaching me responsibility. By the time I realized it wasn't normal, I was already in too deep." "When did you start suspecting?" "Cousin Jeffrey's death. I'd helped research his allergies for the insurance forms. When he died from anaphylaxis, something felt wrong. But Mom said I was being paranoid that lots of people have severe allergies." She pulled out a worn notebook from her bag, one the guards had apparently cleared. "I started keeping track after that. Deaths in our family versus statistics. We were dying at 3 times the normal rate. But every time I brought it up, Mom would gaslight me. Say I was being morbid, that I was upset because of hormones." The notebook was disturbing. Madison had documented every family death for the past decade, noting suspicious circumstances. She'd been building the same case Tyler had, but from a different angle. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "With what suspicions math besides, they're my parents. I kept telling myself I was wrong, that I was seeing patterns that weren't there. Even when Tyler started acting strange, I ignored it." "But the cruise. You knew Lucas had just died and you went on a cruise." Fresh tears flowed. "Mom called it a baby moon. Said I needed to relax for the twins. Said Lucas was already gone and my living babies needed me healthy. She made it sound so logical. But on that ship, when she started talking about the insurance money buying baby furniture, she trailed off, hand on her belly. The twins kicked visibly and I felt an unexpected pang. These babies were innocent of their family's crimes. Jordan recorded everything," Madison continued. "My breakdown when I realized the truth. He was gathering evidence for custody before I even knew I needed a divorce lawyer. He's a good man. He'll raise them right away from this poisonous family. Why should I believe you didn't know?" Madison pulled out her phone, showing me text exchanges with our mother. The manipulation was masterful. Every concern Madison raised was met with guilt trips about not trusting family accusations of being hormonal reminders that everything was for the children. "Look at this one," Madison said, scrolling to a conversation from the day Lucas died. "Mom, the cruise is already booked. Lucas wouldn't want his aunt to miss it because of him." "Madison, but Yvonne needs us." "Mom, Yvonne has always been independent. You need to think about your babies. Stress could cause miscarriage. Is that what you want?" "Madison, of course not, but—" "Mom, then we go. Yvonne will understand. Family means making hard choices." The manipulation was clear, but so was Madison's willingness to be convinced. She'd chosen comfort over compassion just like she'd been taught. "I'm going to testify," Madison said suddenly, "against them. Tyler's not the only one who can tell the truth." "Your lawyer will never allow that." "I fired him. I'm pleading guilty to conspiracy and accessory charges. Jordan's uncle is representing me now just to ensure I get to testify. I'll probably get 15 years instead of 30, but at least my children won't grow up thinking I'm a monster." "You're a monster. You chose a vacation over my son's funeral." "I know," she whispered. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to know that I wasn't part of the murders. I was willfully blind, selfish, and cruel, but I didn't know they were killing our family." A commotion in the hallway interrupted us. Jordan had arrived looking exhausted but determined. He nodded at me briefly before focusing on Madison. "The doctor says you need an emergency C-section," he said flatly. "The stress is affecting the twins. They need parental consent." "I consent," Madison said immediately. "Save my babies." Jordan's expression softened slightly. "I've brought the custody papers. Sign them now before surgery. Full custody to me, no visitation rights until you've served your sentence and completed therapy." Madison signed without reading, tears streaming. "Just promise me you'll tell them I loved them, that I did one right thing by letting you raise them." As they prepared to wheel her to surgery, she grabbed my hand. "Yvonne, in my jewelry box at home, there's a USB drive hidden in the bottom. It has recordings from family dinners going back years. I started recording after Jeffrey died, trying to prove to myself I was paranoid. I wasn't. It's all there. Mom and Dad discussing investments, planning opportunities. Use it." She was wheeled away before I could respond. Jordan lingered, looking uncomfortable. "She's telling the truth about not knowing," he said quietly. "I've lived with Madison for 5 years. She's selfish and shallow, but she's not a killer. Your parents broke her before she had a chance to be anything else. She still chose that cruise over Lucas's funeral. Yes, and she'll live with that for the rest of her life. But she was 33 years old and still asking her mother for permission to think. That's not an excuse, just an explanation." I left the hospital feeling conflicted. Madison was guilty of terrible choices, but she was also a victim of our parents' lifelong manipulation. They'd raised her to be complicit, then used her as a tool in their schemes. The twins she was delivering would never know their grandparents would grow up with their mother in prison, all because of greed disguised as family loyalty. That evening, I retrieved the USB drive from Madison's jewelry box. The recordings were extensive family dinners where murder was discussed between passing the potatoes. My parents speaking in code about opportunities and investments, while Madison and Tyler ate oblivious to the true meaning. One recording stood out from Lucas's 9th birthday party, my parents discussing his timeline while he opened presents in the background. Madison's voice asking about life insurance for the twins she was planning. My mother's response chilling in its casualness. "Insurance on children is always a good investment. You never know what might happen." In the background, Lucas's voice, "Thank you, Grandma. I love you too." The juxtaposition broke me. Lucas thanking his grandmother for a gift while she planned his death for profit. Madison participating unknowingly in her own children's potential murders. Tyler silent and suspicious, but too scared to speak. Me oblivious, believing in a family that existed only in my imagination. Agent Martinez called with an update. Madison had delivered twin boys via emergency C-section. Both were healthy already in Jordan's custody. She'd named them before surgery, Marcus and Bradley. When I asked why those names, Jordan texted me her answer. "Marcus for the uncle they'll never meet because of my family's crimes. Bradley for the fresh start they deserve. Madison would recover under guard and then return to jail to await trial. Her guilty plea and agreement to testify would reduce her sentence, but not eliminate it. 15 years meant her boys would be teenagers before she could hold them again. I sat with the USB drive surrounded by evidence of my family's depravity. Tyler's recordings, Madison's documentation, my own discoveries. Together we'd built an airtight case against our parents. They would die in prison, never touching another insurance payout, never plotting another family member's death. But what haunted me was the damage they'd caused beyond the murders. Tyler so paralyzed by fear he'd watched family die rather than speak up. Madison so manipulated she'd gaslit herself into compliance. Me so trusting I'd handed them my son on a silver platter. The next generation, Marcus and Bradley, would grow up knowing their family history. Jordan promised to be honest with them, age appropriately, to ensure they understood the consequences of greed and the importance of choosing integrity over blood loyalty. I made a decision that night. The insurance money from Lucas's policy, tainted as it was, would go entirely to charity. I'd create a foundation for children with asthma, provide free inhalers and education. Every life saved would be a small redemption for the one I'd lost. Madison's recordings would ensure our parents never left prison. Tyler's testimony would seal their fate. But Madison's broken compliance would haunt me longest. She'd been crafted from birth to enable evil, and only the shock of Lucas's death had finally shattered her programming. In her hospital bed, delivering twins she'd already lost to her choices, Madison had finally become the sister I'd needed at Lucas's funeral. Too late to matter, but perhaps just in time to save her sons from continuing the cycle. The trial would begin soon. 3 broken siblings would testify against the parents who'd raised them to be accomplices or victims. Justice would be served. But in the ruins of our family, something else was emerging. Truth. Accountability. The possibility that the next generation might learn from our tragedy. Lucas and Marcus were gone, murdered for money. But Marcus and Bradley had just entered the world born into truth instead of lies. Maybe that was the real justice breaking the cycle before it could claim more innocent lives. The trial was 2 weeks away when Agent Martinez called with urgency in her voice. "Yvonne, we need you to come in immediately. We've uncovered something that changes everything." I arrived at the federal building to find controlled chaos. Agents were processing boxes of new evidence, and Jennifer Morrison was already there, looking grim. In the conference room, a display of photographs covered an entire wall, connected by red string, like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. But this was no theory. "Your parents' scheme goes beyond families, Agent Martinez began. Once we started pulling financial threads, we found 17 family victims, but also 23 others. Elderly neighbors, church members, even parents of your childhood friends." My legs gave out and I sank into a chair. 40 murders. My parents had killed 40 people over 22 years. How is that possible? Agent Chen pulled up financial records on the screen. They created an entire network. Your father had 3 different insurance licenses under variations of his name. Your mother worked as a home health aide under false credentials, gaining access to elderly victims. They were serial killers hiding in plain sight. The photographs on the wall showed faces I recognized. Mrs. Kowalski from down the street who'd made pierogi for every block party. Dead from a heart attack 3 months after my parents befriended her. Mr. Chen, my piano teacher's father, who'd fallen downstairs during a visit from my mother. Dead within the year of meeting my parents. Every victim had 2 things in common, Agent Martinez explained. They were either elderly or had pre-existing conditions, and they trusted your parents. Robert and Linda Morrison were the nice couple who helped with groceries visited during illness, became surrogate family for lonely people. I stared at a photo of Mrs. Patterson Lucas's favorite babysitter when he was younger. She died from diabetic complications 5 years ago. We'd gone to her funeral. My parents had cried. "The insulin," I whispered, remembering. Mom was always reminding Mrs. Patterson about her insulin. Tampered with, we now believe, like Lucas's inhaler. Your mother had a gift for making murder look like medical mismanagement. Tyler arrived then, accompanied by his attorney. His ankle monitor beeped as he entered. He looked at the wall of victims and went pale. "Oh, God," he breathed. "I knew about family, but this—" "Your cooperation extends to this," his attorney reminded him. "Anything you remember about these victims?" Tyler studied the photos, occasionally pointing out details. This victim had dinner at our house. That one received Christmas cookies from Mom. Each memory added to the horror. Our family home had been a hunting ground, our holiday gatherings, recruitment events for future victims. Madison was wheeled in by guards still recovering from her C-section, but insisting on participating. She took one look at the wall and vomited into a basin. Among the photos was her elderly piano teacher dead 6 months after Madison had introduced her to our parents. "I killed her," Madison sobbed. "I brought her to Sunday dinner because she was lonely. I literally delivered her to them." "You didn't know," I said, surprising myself by comforting her. "Does it matter she's still dead because of me?" The investigation revealed our parents' methodology in sickening detail. They kept journals rating potential victims by profitability versus risk. Mrs. Kowalski rated 810, no family trusting $500K policy potential. Mr. Chen scored 910, language barrier, isolated diabetic. Most disturbing were the photos. Our family albums, which I'd thought captured happy memories, were actually reconnaissance. Every birthday party, neighborhood barbecue, and church potluck had been a hunting expedition. In the background of Lucas's 5th birthday were 3 future victims, all dead within 2 years of that photo. "There's more," Agent Martinez said heavily. She pulled up a map dotted with red pins. "These are suspicious deaths in 3 states where your parents lived before you were born. We're working with cold case units, but the pattern suggests they've been doing this since before any of you were born." The math was staggering. If they'd started in their 20s and maintained this pace, my parents could have killed over 100 people. They weren't just murderers, they were among the most prolific serial killers in American history. A knock interrupted our spiral into horror. An FBI agent entered with a laptop. "We cracked Robert Morrison's encrypted files. You need to see this." The files contained everything: detailed murder plans, insurance paperwork, even a rating system for different killing methods. But one folder made everyone in the room gasp. It was labeled the Yvonne problem. Inside were scenarios for my death, dating back 3 years to right after Marcus died. Dozens of plans, each more elaborate than the last. Car accidents, home invasions, accidental drownings, even a scenario where I died, saving someone else, ensuring I'd be remembered as a hero while they collected millions. "They couldn't decide," Tyler said quietly, reading over my shoulder. "Look at Dad's notes. He says you were too profitable alive taking care of Lucas to kill immediately. But once Lucas was gone—" The final entry was dated the day before they left for the cruise. Why death postponed pending grief period. 6 months optimal for accident scenario. Practice run on Marcus successful. Practice run. My husband's murder had been practice for killing me. I excused myself and barely made it to the bathroom before breaking down completely. Jennifer found me there 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor, unable to process the magnitude of evil I'd been raised by. "We're going to get them," she promised. "Every victim will have justice." When I returned to the conference room, they'd uncovered another horrifying detail. My parents had recruited others: 3 insurance agents who'd helped forge documents, a nurse who'd provided medical information, a mechanic who'd assisted with accidents. The network extended beyond my parents, though they were clearly the masterminds. "We're arresting 12 more people today," Agent Chen announced. "This is officially the largest insurance fraud murder scheme in FBI history." Madison spoke up weakly from her wheelchair. "What about the victims' families? Do they know?" "We're contacting them now. Some cases are too old to prosecute, but the families deserve truth." Over the next hours, we helped identify victims from photos providing names and connections. Each face represented a life stolen, a family destroyed. By the end, the victim count had risen to 67, confirmed with more suspected. As we prepared to leave, Agent Martinez pulled me aside. "There's something else. We found evidence of international connections. Your parents were in contact with similar operations in Canada and Mexico. This might be part of something even bigger." I couldn't process anything larger. My parents had killed 67 people that we knew of. They'd turned murder into a business model and recruited accomplices. They documented everything with the pride of successful entrepreneurs. That night, news of the expanded investigation broke. "Insurance murder ring exposed, 67 dead," dominated headlines. Our family photos were on every channel labeled as American serial killers. Lucas's school picture appeared repeatedly, the youngest victim of insurance fraud killers. Tyler called barely coherent through tears. I found more recordings. Dad discussing expansion opportunities with someone called Mr. Smith. There might be other families doing this, Yvonne, other parents killing their children for money. The FBI took his recordings and launched a multi-state task force. What had started as family betrayal was becoming a national scandal. Insurance companies announced reviews of all policies. Families across the country wondered if their recent losses were really accidents. I sat in Lucas's room that night holding his favorite whale plushie. He'd lived 10 years surrounded by killers, loved by people calculating his death, trusting grandparents who saw him as an investment. But somehow he'd remained pure and loving until the end. "I'm going to stop them all." I promised his empty room. "Every family doing this, every child at risk. Your death won't just stop Grandma and Grandpa. It's going to save others." The trial would now be a media circus. 67 victims meant 67 families wanting justice. Tyler and Madison's testimony would be crucial, but the evidence was overwhelming. My parents would never leave prison. But that wasn't enough anymore. Somewhere out there were other families like mine, other children like Lucas, marked for death by the people who should protect them. The investigation had revealed a cancer in American society, hiding behind insurance paperwork and family smiles. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more arrests, more horror. But tonight I held Lucas's wail and promised him that his death would mean something beyond one family's greed. It would expose an entire network of killers and save children who didn't yet know they were victims. The Morrison family would be remembered as monsters, but maybe, just maybe, that infamy would prevent other families from following our path. Lucas deserved at least that much from his legacy. The story exploded across every media platform within hours. The insurance murders. An American nightmare became the headline that launched 1,000 investigations. News vans surrounded my house, reporters camped on my lawn, and my phone rang nonstop with interview requests from every major network. Sarah helped me navigate the chaos screening calls and coordinating with Jennifer Morrison to craft a single statement. We decided I would do one comprehensive interview with Patricia Williams, the 60 Minutes journalist who'd broken stories on corporate fraud and had a reputation for handling victims with respect. The interview was scheduled for 3 days before the trial. Patricia arrived with a minimal crew, understanding this wasn't entertainment, but testimony. We sat in my living room, Lucas's photos visible behind me, his drawings still on the refrigerator. "Yvonne, thank you for speaking with us," Patricia began gently. "Can you help America understand how this happened? How did your parents hide such evil for so long?" "They didn't hide it," I said, surprising myself with my steady voice. "They displayed it openly. Every family gathering, every holiday photo, every church potluck was a hunting ground. We just couldn't see it because we couldn't imagine parents who would murder their own grandchild for money." The interview lasted 4 hours. I walked Patricia through the timeline, showed her Lucas's artwork, shared the videos Tyler had saved. When she asked about Marcus, I broke down describing how my parents had comforted me after his death while counting their profit. "Your brother and sister are cooperating with authorities," Patricia noted. How do you feel about their involvement? Tyler and Madison were raised by wolves who taught them that family meant profit. The miracle isn't that they participated, it's that they eventually found their conscience. They'll face justice for their choices, but they're also victims of our parents' grooming. Some people say you should have protected Lucas. The question I'd tortured myself with every night. Maybe I should have. But how do you suspect your own parents of plotting murder? How do you look at the people who raised you and see serial killers? I failed Lucas by trusting family, but that trust is what made us human and them monsters. The interview wouldn't air until the night before trial, but segments leaked immediately. Public reaction was intense. Support groups for insurance fraud victims emerged overnight. Families who'd lost loved ones in suspicious circumstances demanded case reviews. Insurance companies faced scrutiny about how policies could be taken out without consent. The media attention brought unexpected connections. Families of other victims reached out sharing their stories. Mrs. Kowalski's niece called from Poland crying as she thanked me for revealing her aunt's murder. Mr. Chen's son had always suspected foul play, but had been dismissed as paranoid. Most heartbreaking was David Lucas's best friend, who appeared at my door with his mother. "I wanted you to know," the 10-year-old said solemnly. Lucas told me his grandparents were weird about his inhaler. He said they always wanted to check it, make sure he had it. I should have told someone. "Sweetheart, this isn't your fault," I assured him, fighting tears. "Nothing anyone did or didn't do makes this your fault." David's mother revealed that my parents had recently befriended them, bringing cookies and offering to babysit, the pattern continuing even while under investigation. She'd found it odd but thought they were being neighborly. Now she realized they'd been grooming their next victim. The story went international when the Canadian and Mexican connections emerged. Similar insurance murder rings were uncovered in Toronto and Mexico City, all sharing methodology with my parents. The FBI announced a joint task force with international law enforcement. Tyler did his own media appearance against his lawyer's advice. He sat with Anderson Cooper and confessed everything, accepting full responsibility while detailing our parents' methods. His description of family dinners where murder was discussed like stock options shocked even hardened journalists. "I'm going to prison," Tyler stated clearly. "I deserve to. I let fear turn me into a coward who watched people die. But I want other cowards watching this to know it's not too late. Come forward, save the next victim. Live with guilt rather than letting others die." Madison, still recovering, gave a written statement read by her attorney. She detailed the grooming process, how our parents normalized profiting from death until it seemed like smart financial planning. She announced all proceeds from her story would go to victims' families. The media circus intensified when Hollywood came calling. Production companies wanted to buy our story rights, promising to honor Lucas's memory while offering millions. I refused them all, but Tyler signed a deal, donating his proceeds to the Lucas Foundation I was establishing. Online, the story took darker turns. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Reddit threads analyzed family photos for missed clues. TikTok creators made videos warning about insurance fraud signs. Lucas's photo became a symbol shared with hashtags like, "Some coverage was cruel." Tabloids published headlines like "Family of Killers" and "Raised by Monsters." They dug up school photos of Tyler and Madison as children asking, "Born evil." Conservative pundits used our story to rail against moral decay. Liberal commentators blamed capitalism and healthcare costs. But among the noise were moments of grace. Lucas's teacher organized a scholarship fund in his name. His baseball team retired his number with Coach Martinez, telling reporters, "Lucas represented everything good about childhood. We won't let his death be just about evil." The weekend before trial, 60 Minutes aired my interview. Patricia Williams had crafted a respectful but devastating portrait of American family turned killing machine. The footage of Lucas playing unaware his grandparents were plotting his death left viewers sobbing. The response was immediate. The Attorney General announced a nationwide review of insurance fraud cases. Congress scheduled hearings on insurance reform. Child protection advocates used our case to push for stronger oversight of policies involving minors. That night, remembering Lucas trended globally. People shared stories of their own children, their own losses, their own narrow escapes from family predators. The collective grief and rage was overwhelming, but also cathartic. Lucas's death had exposed a hidden epidemic. Among the thousands of messages, one stood out. A woman in Oregon wrote that my interview had given her the courage to report her own suspicions about her in-laws. Police investigation revealed they'd taken out policies on her disabled daughter. The child was safe because of our story. Lucas saved her. I told Sarah, crying over the letter. He's gone, but he saved her. More letters followed. Families who discovered policies they never authorized. Elderly people who realized friendly neighbors had ulterior motives. Insurance agents who'd noticed suspicious patterns and finally reported them. Each intervention was Lucas's legacy. The media storm showed no signs of abating as trial approached. Court TV announced gavel-to-gavel coverage. Major newspapers assigned teams of reporters. The insurance murders had become the crime story of the decade. My parents, isolated in maximum security, were reportedly furious about the coverage. Through their lawyer, they claimed media bias was preventing a fair trial. The judge denied their motion, noting that their own detailed documentation of murders made media coverage irrelevant to guilt. The night before trial, I did one final interview, this time with local news. I sat in Lucas's room, surrounded by his ocean books and drawings. Tomorrow your parents go on trial for killing your son and dozens of others. What do you hope for? Justice, I said simply. But more than that, I hope every parent watching remembers that children are treasures, not commodities. That family means protection, not profit. That Lucas's life mattered more than any amount of money. What would you say to your parents if they were watching? I looked directly at the camera, knowing they might see this from their cells. I say nothing. They're not worth words. Lucas's memory, the victims' families, the truth, that's what matters. You killed my baby for vacation money. There's nothing left to say. The interview ended with footage of Lucas at the beach, chasing waves and laughing, his joy in stark contrast to the evil that had surrounded him. America went to sleep that night, with his image burned into collective memory, a little boy who'd loved the ocean and died because his grandparents loved money more. Tomorrow the trial would begin. The media would document every moment. But tonight belonged to Lucas and the dozens of others whose lives had been stolen by the people who should have protected them. Their stories, not their killers, would be what mattered in the end. The courthouse steps were packed with media and victims' families as I arrived for the first day of trial. Signs with photos of the 67 confirmed victims lined the pathway. Lucas's baseball team stood in uniform, creating an honor guard. I walked through them with Sarah and Jennifer Morrison, trying not to look at my son's photo repeated on dozens of posters. Inside courtroom. The largest in the federal building, every seat was filled. The victims' families took up 3 sections. Media occupied another. The jury box held 12 citizens who would decide if my parents spent their remaining years in prison. My parents were brought in separately, no longer allowed contact. They'd aged dramatically in custody. My father's confident swagger was gone, replaced by the shuffle of a broken man. My mother had lost her perfect composure, her hair gray and thin without salon treatments. Neither looked at me. Judge Patricia Hawkins, known for her no-nonsense approach to major trials, called the court to order. The lead prosecutor, Amanda Chen, stood to deliver her opening statement. What followed was 90 minutes of devastating precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will hear about parents who murdered their 10-year-old grandson for vacation money. But that's just where this story ends. It begins 22 years ago with a calculated decision to turn murder into profit. She laid out the case methodically. 67 victims over 2 decades, $40 million in insurance payouts, a network of accomplices, children, elderly, disabled, all reduced to balance sheets. The projected displayed Lucas's photo next to his insurance policy, his bright smile juxtaposed with the dollar amount of his death. The defense attorney Marcus Wellington tried to create doubt. He painted my parents as aggressive investors who'd been misunderstood their coincidental proximity to deaths twisted by grieving families and ambitious prosecutors. But even he seemed to struggle with the magnitude of evidence. Tyler took the stand first, wearing a suit that couldn't hide his ankle monitor. He testified for 6 hours over 2 days, detailing everything he'd witnessed, overheard, and eventually recorded. His testimony about the tampered inhaler made several jurors cry. "Did you see your father tamper with Lucas's inhaler?" Amanda Chen asked. "No, but I heard him discussing it with Mom. He said the compound would trigger severe bronchospasm that wouldn't respond to medication. He called it insurance, making sure the regular inhaler wouldn't work." "And you said nothing?" "I said nothing," Tyler confirmed, his voice breaking. "I let my nephew die because I was a coward. I'm here now because I can't let them kill anyone else." The defense tried to paint Tyler as a lying conspirator saving himself, but his recordings destroyed that narrative. The jury heard our father discussing brake lines and insulin doses like grocery lists. They heard our mother coaching Madison on finding opportunities among elderly neighbors. Madison testified by video link from the hospital, still too weak to attend. Her testimony focused on the grooming aspect, how our parents had normalized profiting from death until it seemed like financial planning. "They started when I was 5, she said, teaching me to read obituaries for investment opportunities. By the time I realized other families didn't do this, I was already complicit." "But you went on a cruise while your nephew was being buried," Amanda Chen pressed. "I did," Madison admitted. "I chose comfort over compassion. I let my parents convince me that my pregnancy mattered more than my sister's grief. I'll live with that shame forever." The most damaging testimony came from Agent Martinez, who presented the evidence in excruciating detail: forged signatures, tampered medications, cut brake lines, staged accidents. The jury saw photos of every victim, heard about their lives, their families, their trust in my parents. When she showed the Yvonne problem file detailing plans for my murder, my mother finally reacted. "She was never supposed to see that," she blurted out before her attorney could silence her. "Because she was supposed to be dead?" Amanda Chen asked calmly. "My mother invoked her Fifth Amendment right, but the damage was done. She'd essentially admitted to planning my murder in open court. I testified on day 7. Amanda Chen walked me through finding the insurance papers, discovering the network, living with the knowledge that my son's grandparents had murdered him for money. They held him as a baby," I said, looking directly at my parents for the first time. "They celebrated his birthdays. They tucked him in at sleepovers, and the entire time they were waiting for him to die so they could go on vacation." "Objection," the defense attorney called. "Prejudicial." "It's fact," Judge Hawkins replied. "Continue, Ms. Morrison." I detailed Lucas's final days, his excitement about the sleepover, his careful packing of his tampered inhaler. I described identifying his body while my family booked cruise excursions. Several jurors were openly weeping by the time I finished. The defense's cross-examination was brutal but backfired. Every attempt to paint me as vindictive or mentally unstable only highlighted the monstrosity of what I'd endured. When Wellington suggested I was profiting from media attention, I lost my composure. "Profiting? My son is dead. My husband is dead. Everyone I loved was murdered by the people sitting at that table. You want to talk about profit? Ask them about the $40 million they made from killing family members." Judge Hawkins called a recess, but the point was made. The jury had seen my raw grief contrasted with my parents' greed. The parade of victims' families took another week. Each testimony built the pattern. My parents befriending lonely people, gaining trust, taking out policies, and then deaths, following within months. Mrs. Kowalski's niece flew from Poland to testify about her aunt's final letter mentioning new friends Robert and Linda, who were so helpful with my medications. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Digital trails showed policy applications filed from my parents' IP address. Financial records revealed deposits matching death benefits within days of each victim's passing. The murder weapons varied, but the profit motive never changed. My father took the stand against his attorney's advice. He maintained innocence for exactly 45 minutes before Amanda Chen's questioning cracked him like an egg. She simply presented his own notes, his own recordings, his own plans, asking him to explain each one. This note says, Lucas, December optimal. What did that mean? Investment timing, he said weakly. Investment in what? His future. His future after death. My father's silence was damning. When Amanda showed the email about cruise bookings while Lucas was dying, he finally broke. It was already too late for the boy. We couldn't waste the opportunity. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hawkins threatened to clear the gallery. My father tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. He'd admitted to seeing Lucas's death as an opportunity. My mother never testified, invoking her Fifth Amendment right throughout, but her reactions told the story. When prosecutors played Tyler's recording of her listing murder victims like accomplishments, she smiled slightly. When they showed the tampered inhaler, she looked annoyed at the poor quality that had allowed detection. Closing arguments took 2 days. Amanda Chen methodically laid out 67 murders, showing the pattern, the profit, the premeditation. She ended with Lucas's school photo. This little boy loved the ocean. He dreamed of swimming with dolphins. He trusted his grandparents. That trust cost him his life and bought them a Caribbean cruise. If that's not murder, nothing is. The defense made a weak attempt at reasonable doubt, suggesting coincidence and misinterpretation. But Wellington's heart wasn't in it. How do you defend documented serial killers who'd celebrated their grandson's death with umbrella drinks? The jury deliberated for exactly 3 hours. As they filed back in, none would look at my parents. The foreman stood hands trembling as he held the verdict. On the count of first-degree murder in the death of Lucas Morrison, we find the defendants guilty. On the count of first-degree murder in the death of Marcus Morrison, we find the defendants guilty. 65 more times guilty verdicts rang out. Conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, money laundering, racketeering, every charge guilty on all counts. My mother fainted. My father stared straight ahead, finally looking like the 73-year-old killer he was. Tyler sobbed with relief. Madison watched on video, holding a photo of the twins she wouldn't raise. Judge Hawkins scheduled sentencing for the following month, but made one thing clear. The defendants will remain in custody. They've proven themselves dangers to any family member or stranger with an insurance policy. They will never walk free again. As court officers led my parents away, my mother finally looked at me. No apology, no remorse, just cold fury that I'd exposed their scheme. My father didn't even turn around. The parents I'd thought I'd known had never existed. Only the killers remained. Outside the courthouse, victims' families embraced me. Mrs. Kowalski's niece pressed a rosary into my hands. Mr. Chen's son stood with us as Amanda Chen announced the verdicts to the media. Justice was served today, but it can't bring back 67 innocent people. It can't give Yvonne Morrison her son and husband back. It can only ensure their killers never harm another family. That night, I sat in Lucas's room with Sarah Tyler and even Madison on video. We were what remained of the Morrison family, broken and guilty in various degrees, but finally free from our parents' evil. "What now?" Tyler asked. "Now we make sure Lucas's death means something," I said. "The foundation, the legislation, the awareness. We save the next child whose grandparents see dollar signs instead of love. And we try to heal." Madison added quietly, her twins sleeping in her arms under Jordan's supervision. Healing seemed impossible, but as I looked at Lucas's drawings of whales and dolphins, I remembered his belief that every creature deserved love and protection. He'd been right. We just learned it too late. The trial was over. The verdicts were in. But the work of honoring the victims and preventing future murders had just begun. Lucas couldn't swim with dolphins, but maybe his legacy could save other children who still might. Sentencing day arrived with the first snow of winter. I stood at Lucas's grave that morning, brushing white flakes from his headstone. "Today, baby," I whispered. "Today they pay for what they did to you." The courthouse was even more packed than during trial. Judge Hawkins had received over 3,000 victim impact statements from extended families, community members, and strangers moved by the case. She'd allocated 3 days for sentencing to honor every voice. My parents were brought in looking diminished. Prison had stripped away their masks completely. Gone were the friendly neighbors, the doting grandparents, the helpful community members. Only the hollow-eyed killers remained. Tyler entered in custody, having been sentenced separately to 8 years, with possibility of parole in 5. He'd wept at his sentencing, accepting responsibility while promising to spend his remaining years helping prevent similar crimes. Madison had received 12 years, serving the first 6 months in a prison hospital while recovering from childbirth and severe depression. Before I pronounced sentence, Judge Hawkins began, "I want to address something. In 30 years on the bench, I've seen evil, but I've never seen evil wrapped so completely in the disguise of family love. Robert and Linda Morrison, you didn't just murder 67 people. You perverted the sacred trust between parent and child, grandparent, and grandchild." She allowed victim impact statements first. I went last, wanting my words to be what my parents heard before learning their fate. "You taught me that family meant everything." I began, my voice steady. "You were right. Family does mean everything. That's why your betrayal is so complete. You held Lucas as a baby and plotted his death. You comforted me after Marcus's funeral while counting the money from his murder. You turned love into a weapon and trust into a trap." I pulled out Lucas's whale drawing, holding it up. "My son drew this the week before you killed him. He was going to be a marine biologist. He was going to save the oceans. Instead, you decided his life was worth less than a cruise ship ticket." My mother tried to look away, but I continued. "I'm not here to forgive you. Some things are unforgivable. I'm here to tell you that despite your evil love won. Lucas died loving you, believing in family, trusting in goodness. You killed his body, but not his spirit. Every child saved by the foundation in his name, every family protected by new laws, every parent who hugs their baby tighter because of this case. That's Lucas defeating you over and over again." I sat down to complete silence. Even the court reporter had tears on her face. Judge Hawkins took a moment before continuing. "Robert Morrison, you've been convicted of 67 counts of first-degree murder, 43 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 18 counts of insurance fraud, and 12 counts of money laundering. For the murders alone, I sentence you to 67 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole." The math was staggering. Even if he lived to be 200, my father would die in prison. "Linda Morrison, you've been convicted of the same crimes. I sentence you to 67 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. You will both die in federal maximum security prison, never again able to harm another family." My mother finally broke sobbing, not with remorse, but with self-pity. "This isn't fair. We're old. Prison will kill us." "Prison won't kill you," Judge Hawkins replied coldly. "Old age will. Unlike your victims, you'll die naturally surrounded by medical care after years to reflect on your crimes. That's more mercy than you showed Lucas Morrison or any of your other victims." She continued with financial penalties. Every asset would be liquidated for victim compensation. The house I'd grown up in, the cars, the retirement accounts built on blood money, all would be distributed to families they'd destroyed. Furthermore, Judge Hawkins added, "I'm recommending you serve your sentences in separate facilities at opposite ends of the country. You conspired together in life. You'll face justice alone." My parents reached for each other as court officers moved to separate them. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in their eyes. They'd face their remaining years alone, surrounded by concrete and regret. As they were led away, my father finally spoke to me. "Yvonne, please, we're still your parents." "No," I said firmly. "My parents died the day I buried my son alone. You're just the murderers who killed them." My mother's last words were more revealing. "You've destroyed our legacy." "Your legacy was murder. I'm building Lucas's legacy of love and justice. Goodbye, Linda. Goodbye, Robert. May you live long, lonely lives remembering what you threw away for money." They disappeared through separate doors, beginning journeys to prisons thousands of miles apart. The Morrison family murders were over. Justice, as much as possible, had been served. Outside the courthouse, the scene was overwhelming. Victims' families held photos of their loved ones. Lucas's baseball team had raised their gloves in salute. The media captured it all, broadcasting justice delayed but not denied. Amanda Chen spoke to the crowd. "Today's sentences ensure Robert and Linda Morrison will never harm another family. But our work isn't done. Insurance fraud murders happen every day. Lucas's law currently in Congress would require stricter oversight of policies involving minors and elderly. We urge you to contact your representatives." Tyler, in custody but allowed to attend, approached me with his guard's permission. "I know I have no right to ask, but will you tell me about the foundation? How I can help from prison?" I studied my brother, seeing the 10-year-old who'd taught Lucas to throw a baseball. "You want to help, really help? Then speak at every prison, every police academy, every insurance conference that will have you. Tell them how cowardice enables evil. Save the next family by teaching others to speak up." He nodded, tears falling. "Every day, I promise." Madison appeared on the courtroom's video screen from her prison hospital. "Yvonne, the twins. When they're old enough, will you tell them their mother loved them enough to tell the truth, that I chose prison over perpetuating the cycle?" "I'll tell them." I promised. Jordan's a good father. They'll grow up knowing right from wrong, love from greed. They'll know their cousin Lucas through the foundation saving other children. That evening, I hosted a gathering for the victims' families at a local community center. We shared stories not of how our loved ones died, but how they'd lived. Mrs. Kowalski loved polka dancing. Mr. Chen grew the best tomatoes in 3 counties. Each person murdered by my parents had been vibrant, valuable, irreplaceable. My parents saw dollar signs. I told the group. "We see faces, heart, souls. That's our victory. They reduced our loved ones to numbers, but we restore their humanity by remembering them fully." We established a support network that night families bonded by the unique horror of insurance murder. Together, we'd push for legislation support each other through grief and ensure no family experienced what we had. Sarah drove me home past the cemetery. I asked her to stop needing to tell Lucas about the sentences. At his grave, I found flowers from strangers' tokens, from his baseball team drawings from classmates. Even in death, he was more loved than his grandparents ever were in life. "They're going to die in prison, baby," I told the headstone. "Grandma and Grandpa will never hurt another child, and Uncle Tyler and Aunt Madison are sorry, really sorry. They're trying to make it right." The wind picked up swirling snow around the cemetery. For a moment, I could almost hear Lucas's laugh, see him trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue. My parents had stolen his future, but they couldn't steal my memories or his impact on the world. That night, the news covered the sentencing extensively. Legal experts called it the harshest sentence ever given for insurance fraud murders. Victim advocates praised it as a deterrent. My parents' photos appeared next to the label, "American Serial Killers, Their Legacy Sealed." But the coverage I cared about focused on the victims. 67 faces, 67 stories, 67 reasons to reform insurance law and protect the vulnerable. Lucas's photo appeared most often, the little boy whose death exposed a massive murder network. I fell asleep in his room, surrounded by his things. Tomorrow would bring the work of building his foundation, pushing for legislation, healing what could be healed. But tonight was for quiet victory. The murderers who'd hidden behind parental love were gone forever. The families they'd destroyed had justice. Lucas and Marcus were still gone. Nothing could bring them back. But their killers would die in cages alone and forgotten, except as cautionary tales. Sometimes justice isn't about healing. Sometimes it's just about ensuring evil can't spread. My parents had gained $40 million and lost their souls, their freedom, their family. They'd spend their remaining years calculating that exchange, realizing they'd made the worst deal in history. They'd traded love for money and ended up with neither. That was Lucas's final victory over the grandparents who'd seen him as an investment. He died rich in love while they'd lived poor in everything that mattered. Justice had been served cold and complete as the winter snow covering his grave. 1 year later, I stood before a crowd of 500 at the grand opening of the Lucas Morrison Foundation headquarters. The building, purchased with funds from my parents' liquidated assets, buzzed with purpose. Banners reading "Every breath matters" hung beside Lucas's smiling photo. My son loved the ocean. I began my speech steady after months of practice. He dreamed of protecting sea life. Today, we protect children's lives in his memory. Because of Lucas, no child in our state will go without an inhaler. No family will choose between medication and rent. The foundation had grown beyond my wildest hopes. Corporate sponsors touched by Lucas's story donated millions. Pharmaceutical companies provided inhalers at cost. Schools installed emergency medication stations. In 12 months, we'd distributed over 10,000 free inhalers and prevented 47 severe asthma attacks. Tyler joined via video link from federal prison, where he ran educational programs about recognizing insurance fraud. He'd testified before Congress supporting Lucas's law, his prisoner number visible, as he warned about family predators. His haunted eyes showed the weight of living with truth. "Every day I teach inmates about the price of silence," Tyler said. "I tell them about Lucas, about how my cowardice cost my nephew's life. If just one person speaks up because of my story, maybe Lucas's death serves a purpose." Madison appeared on screen from her facility's library, where she'd created a support group for children of incarcerated parents. Though forbidden contact with her twins, she worked to help other families avoid their fate. The foundation received another anonymous donation, she reported. $50,000 from someone who discovered their parents had life insurance they never authorized. Lucas's story saved another life. The crowd applauded, but I saw the pain in my siblings' eyes. They devoted themselves to redemption but would never forgive themselves. Neither would I completely. But Lucas had taught me that people were more than their worst moments. Dr. Patricia Hernandez, our medical director, presented statistics that made the crowd gasp. Since the foundation's launch, emergency room visits for severe asthma had dropped 30% in our coverage area. Teachers trained in our programs had saved 9 children from fatal attacks. Lucas Morrison didn't get to become the marine biologist he dreamed of being, Dr. Hernandez said. But he saved more lives than most doctors. His legacy breathes in every child who receives free medication. The highlight came when David Lucas's best friend took the stage. Now 11, he'd become our youngest spokesperson, visiting schools to teach inhaler safety. "Lucas was my best friend," David said simply. "He can't grow up, but I can help other kids grow up. That's what best friends do, keep promises even when one is gone." He demonstrated proper inhaler use on a dummy while explaining warning signs. The corporate executives wiped away tears watching this child turn grief into action. By the end, 3 more companies pledged support. Sarah had become the foundation's director, bringing her business acumen to our mission. She presented our expansion plans, mobile clinics for rural areas, family education programs, lobbying for stronger insurance oversight. "We've received partnership requests from 6 other states," Sarah announced. "By next year, the Lucas Morrison Foundation will be national. Every child in America will have access to life-saving medication." The audience erupted in sustained applause. I caught sight of several familiar faces. Mrs. Kowalski's niece had flown in from Poland. Mr. Chen's son had brought his children. Agent Martinez attended in civilian clothes, having retired to work in victim advocacy. Amanda Chen, now a federal judge, sat in the front row. As the formal program ended, families mingled in the courtyard garden. We'd planted 68 trees, one for each victim, including Marcus. Lucas's tree, a coastal redwood that would grow for centuries, stood at the center. Children ran between the saplings, their laughter healing ground once poisoned by grief. A mother approached me holding a toddler with an inhaler. "This is Emma," she said, tears flowing. "Your foundation saved her last month. The school had an emergency inhaler because of your program. I wanted you to meet the life Lucas saved." I held Emma, feeling her healthy breathing against my chest. This was Lucas's true legacy, not the horror of his death, but the lives continuing because of it. My parents had killed for money. We saved for love. That evening, the foundation hosted its first gala. Hundreds attended, raising $3 million for expansion. I wore the ocean blue dress Lucas had helped pick for my last birthday with him, honoring his memory through color. Tyler called during the event, our scheduled weekly check-in. Prison had aged him decades, but purpose had replaced despair. 60 inmates signed up for tomorrow's fraud prevention seminar, he reported. Word spreading. Lifers are asking how to report suspicious deaths from decades ago. Good, I said. Every report matters. Every saved life counts. Yvonne, I need to tell you something. I dream about Lucas every night. He's always at the ocean, always happy. He tells me he forgives me. I know it's just my subconscious seeking peace I don't deserve, but maybe it's more than that, I interrupted. Lucas forgave everyone. Even at the end, he loved Grandma and Grandpa. Not because they deserved it, but because that's who he was. Honor that forgiveness by saving others. Madison joined the call from her prison job at the library. The warden approved my proposal. We're starting a children's reading program. I'm going to read Lucas's favorite ocean books to kids visiting their parents. It's small, but... It's not small, I assured her. Lucas would love that. We talked for 20 minutes, 3 broken siblings finding purpose in shared grief. Our parents had taught us family meant profit. Lucas had taught us family meant sacrifice for others' well-being. We were finally learning his lesson. The gala concluded with a video presentation. Families shared stories of children saved by the foundation. Teachers demonstrated emergency response protocols. Legislators discussed Lucas's law, now passed in 12 states, with federal legislation pending. The final image was Lucas at the beach arms, spread wide as waves crashed behind him. His joy radiated from the screen, unmarred by the evil that would claim him. That's how we chose to remember him, embracing life with infectious enthusiasm. Judge Patricia Hawkins, who'd sentenced my parents, approached afterward. I've presided over thousands of cases, she said. I've never seen evil transformed into such good. Your son would be proud. I hope so, I replied. Some days the grief threatens to drown me. Then another child is saved. Another family spared our pain, and I remember why we do this. As guests departed, I walked through the garden to Lucas's tree. Despite being planted just months ago, it was thriving, reaching towards sky like his dreams once had. I touched its bark, feeling life pulsing beneath. We did it, baby, I whispered. Grandma and Grandpa are locked away. Uncle Tyler and Aunt Madison are trying to make amends. And you, my brave boy, you're saving lives every day. Not bad for a 10-year-old who loved dolphins. A breeze rustled the leaves, and for a moment I heard his laugh. Not the painful memory of loss, but the joyful echo of impact. Lucas Morrison had lived just 10 years, but his legacy would last generations. Tomorrow would bring more work, more families to help, more laws to pass, more children to save. The foundation was just beginning its mission. But tonight, surrounded by trees planted for the dead and hope growing for the living, I felt something I hadn't in 2 years: peace. My parents had stolen so much. My husband, my son, my faith in family, but they'd failed to steal what mattered most: love's power to transform tragedy into purpose. In trying to profit from death, they'd created warriors for life. The last couple left, thanking me again for saving their daughter. As their car disappeared, Sarah emerged from the building. "Ready to go home?" she asked gently. "In a minute," I said, looking up at stars Lucas once wished upon. "I want to tell him about today, about all the lives he saved, about how love won in the end." Sarah squeezed my shoulder and waited while I talked to my son about the foundation bearing his name, about Uncle Tyler teaching prisoners to speak up, about Aunt Madison reading to children, about trees growing where evil once flourished. When I finally turned to leave, I felt Lucas's presence like warmth despite the cool night. My parents had thought they were so clever trading lives for money, but Lucas had the last laugh. In dying, he'd created more life than they could ever steal. In losing him, I'd found purpose they could never understand. The foundation's lights glowed behind us as Sarah drove me home. Tomorrow, somewhere, a child would breathe easier because of Lucas. A family would stay whole because of his story. Love would triumph over greed because a little boy who dreamed of oceans had shown us the way. That was rebuilding. Not forgetting the pain, but transforming it. Not forgiving the unforgivable, but creating beauty from ashes. Not moving on, but moving forward with purpose, born from profound loss. Lucas Morrison, age 10, dreamer of dolphins, savior of children. My parents had seen a paycheck. I saw a legacy of love that would outlive us all. They were dying in prison. He was living in every saved breath. 2 years after the trial, I stood at Lucas's grave on a brilliant spring morning. The small cemetery plot had become a pilgrimage site for families touched by insurance murder. Today, fresh flowers covered the ground left by strangers who'd never met my son but knew his story. "Happy 13th birthday, baby," I whispered, placing his favorite whale plushie beside the headstone. "You would have been a teenager today, probably taller than me, definitely still obsessed with the ocean." Footsteps crunched on the gravel path behind me. I turned to find my foster children, Maria and James, approaching carefully. I'd begun fostering 6 months ago 2 siblings whose parents died in an accident, eerily similar to Marcus's. Their grandmother was currently under investigation for insurance fraud. "Can we leave these for Lucas?" Maria, 8, held out a drawing of dolphins she'd made. James, 6, clutched a small toy submarine. "He would love these," I assured them, helping them place the gifts. They'd never met Lucas, but spoke of him like a big brother, understanding that his death had led to their safety. As we stood together, more people arrived. David and his mother brought Lucas's baseball team, now in middle school but still wearing patches with his number. Coach Martinez had organized them to volunteer at foundation events, keeping Lucas's memory alive through service. "The boys wanted to share something," Coach Martinez said, his voice thick with emotion. The team formed a circle around the grave. David stepped forward, now tall and confident at 12, so different from the grief-stricken boy who'd blamed himself for not recognizing the tampered inhaler. "Lucas Morrison was our teammate," David began. "He taught us that winning wasn't about the score, but about showing up for each other. Today we're here to tell him we're still showing up." Each boy shared a memory of Lucas, then announced their commitment to the foundation. They'd raised $20,000 through car washes and bake sales. They'd spoken at schools about inhaler safety. They'd turned their grief into action just like their lost teammate would have wanted. Sarah arrived with Madison, who was on a supervised release for the day. My sister looked healthier than she had in years prison structure and therapy, finally breaking our parents' psychological hold. She carried a tablet showing her twins, now 2 years old, via video call with Jordan. "Boys wave to Cousin Lucas," Madison instructed gently. The toddlers waved at the headstone, babbling, "Ha" to the cousin they'd never meet, but would always know through stories and the foundation's work. "They're healthy." Madison told me, tears flowing. Marcus just started talking. His first word was help. And Jordan says it's because he's going to help people like his cousin Lucas did. Tyler couldn't attend physically, but he'd sent a letter to be read aloud. Sarah unfolded it, clearing her throat before beginning. "Dear Lucas, today you would have been 13. I would have taught you to drive badly and snuck you into PG-13 movies. Instead, I'm teaching prisoners to recognize fraud and speaking at conferences about the cost of silence. It's not the relationship I wanted with my nephew, but it's the one my cowardice created. The foundation has saved 237 children so far. That's 237 birthdays that will happen because of your death. I count them every night, hoping eventually the number will be high enough to balance my failure. It never will be, but I'll keep counting anyway. Your mom fostered Maria and James. They're safe because your story exposed their grandmother's plans. They sleep in your room, sometimes surrounded by your ocean books. Life continues in the spaces death tried to claim. Happy birthday, nephew. Thank you for teaching me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. I was too late learning that lesson, but others won't be. Love, Uncle Tyler. We stood in silence after Sarah finished reading. Even the birds seemed to pause in respect. Then James tugged on my hand. Miss Yvonne, can we sing Happy Birthday to Lucas? Of course, sweetheart. Our strange assembled family sang Happy Birthday around a grave voices mixing in harmony, born from shared loss and purpose. Neighbors in the cemetery didn't stare or judge. They understood that grief takes many forms, and healing requires acknowledging what should have been. After the song, people began sharing updates. The foundation had expanded to all 50 states. Lucas's law had passed federally, requiring stricter oversight and mandatory reporting of suspicious policies. Insurance companies now faced real penalties for enabling fraud. Agent Martinez, now running a nonprofit supporting fraud victims, announced a breakthrough. The international investigation has led to 43 arrests across 5 countries. The network your parents were part of is being dismantled globally. No estimate yet on total victims, but it's in the thousands. The magnitude was staggering. My parents hadn't just been serial killers. They'd been part of an international murder ring, hiding behind insurance paperwork. Every arrest, every exposed policy, every saved life was Lucas's legacy expanding. There's something else, Judge Amanda Chen said, having joined our gathering. Congress is considering the Lucas-Morrison Act. It would create a federal database of life insurance policies, flagging suspicious patterns automatically. No more secret policies on family members. Madison gripped my hand. Mom and Dad's computer virus of death stops spreading, she whispered. Lucas becomes the vaccine. As the afternoon wore on, people shared stories of lives saved. A teacher in Oregon caught a student's asthma attack because of foundation training. A grandmother in Florida discovered unauthorized policies on her grandchildren during a routine check inspired by our story. A family in Texas survived because a mechanic recognized signs of tampering from Tyler's prison seminars. Each story was a victory over my parents' evil. They'd killed for profit, but Lucas's death had created an army of protectors. They'd seen family as opportunities, but we'd built a global family united against exploitation. As the gathering wound down, I noticed a woman standing apart holding a young boy's hand. Something about her hesitant posture caught my attention. I approached carefully, Maria and James flanking me protectively. I'm Yvonne, I said gently. Are you here for Lucas? The woman's eyes filled with tears. I'm Patricia Williams, not the journalist, just a mom from Kansas. This is my son, Eddie. He's alive because of your boy. She explained how Eddie's grandfather had taken out a large policy without their knowledge. After seeing our story on the news, she'd investigated and discovered plans for an accident during an upcoming camping trip. The grandfather was now in prison. Eddie was safe. I know you must hear this all the time, Patricia continued. But Lucas saved my baby. I needed Eddie to see where his guardian angel rests, to say thank you. Eddie, about 8, stepped forward shyly. Thank you, Lucas, he said to the headstone. I'm going to be a marine biologist like you wanted. I'll save the dolphins for both of us. I knelt beside this living child, seeing Lucas in his earnest eyes. He would love that. Lucas believed everyone could help save the ocean. You're proof he was right. As Patricia and Eddie left promising to support the foundation, I realized this was our new normal. Lucas's grave had become a place of pilgrimage and promise, where saved children pledged to live the dreams he couldn't. The sun began setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples Lucas would have loved. Maria and James helped me gather the day's offerings, drawings, flowers, letters, and toys from grateful families. We'd donate them to children's hospitals, spreading the love Lucas attracted even in death. Was Lucas really brave? James asked as we packed up. The bravest, I confirmed. He trusted people even when they didn't deserve it. He loved without calculation. He believed in goodness despite being surrounded by evil. That's the ultimate bravery. Will we be brave like him? Maria wondered. You already are, I assured her. You survived something terrible and still chose to love. Lucas would be so proud of you both. As we prepared to leave, I took one last moment at the grave. 2 years ago, I'd buried my son alone, while my family celebrated his death on a cruise ship. Today, hundreds considered themselves Lucas's family, united not by blood, but by purpose. We did it, baby, I whispered. Grandma and Grandpa thought they won, but look around. You're saving lives every day. You're changing laws. You're teaching people to protect instead of profit. Not bad for a 10-year-old who just wanted to swim with dolphins. A warm breeze rustled through the cemetery, carrying the salt scent of distant oceans. Somewhere, Lucas was swimming with those dolphins, free from the evil that had stolen his earthly future. But his true spirit lived on in every saved child, every changed law, every family spared our agony. My parents had gained $40 million and lost everything that mattered. They'd die alone in concrete cells, their names synonymous with evil. Lucas had lost his life and gained immortality through love. His name meant protection, hope, and the triumph of good over greed. As we drove home, Maria and James chattering about their plans to help at the foundation's upcoming event, I smiled through tears. This was Lucas's true legacy, not the horror of his death, but the love that refused to die with him. Not the family that failed him, but the global family rising to protect others. The lesson was simple but profound. Evil may prosper temporarily, but love endures eternally. My parents had taught me that family meant opportunity for profit. Lucas had taught me that family meant opportunity for sacrifice. In choosing his definition over theirs, I'd found meaning in the meaningless purpose, in pain and beauty, in the ashes of betrayal. Tomorrow would mark 1,000 days since Lucas's death. 1,000 days of missing him, fighting for justice and building his legacy, but also 1,000 days of lives saved, families protected, and love triumphing over greed. That was the lesson Lucas left us. Not that evil doesn't exist, it does sometimes, wearing the face of those who should love us most. But that good can grow from evil's destruction, that love is stronger than greed, and that one small boy who dreamed of oceans could save more lives in death than his killers could ever take. The Lucas Morrison Foundation's motto came from something he'd said during his last birthday. Even the biggest waves start with a single drop. He'd been talking about ocean formation, but it became our rallying cry. One boy's death, creating waves of change, drops of hope spreading across the world. My parents had seen Lucas as a single transaction worth $50,000. They'd valued his life at the cost of a cruise. But Lucas's true worth was immeasurable, calculated not in dollars, but in lives saved, families protected, and evil exposed. He was priceless, and his legacy would outlive us all. As we pulled into our driveway, Maria pointed to the foundation billboard visible from our street. Lucas's smiling face looked down at us, accompanied by the words, "Every child deserves to breathe." Below, smaller text announced that 237 children had been saved so far this year. 238, I corrected softly, thinking of Eddie from Kansas. And counting. Inside the house that had once echoed with emptiness, now rang with children's laughter. Maria and James raced to Lucas's room, now theirs, to add today's drawings to their collection. They kept his ocean books on special shelves, reading them when they missed the big brother they'd never met. That night, as I tucked them in, surrounded by Lucas's whale posters and dolphin books, James asked the question I'd been dreading. "Miss Yvonne, will someone try to hurt us for insurance money again?" I sat on his bed, choosing my words carefully. Not on my watch. See, Lucas made sure of that. His story taught people to watch for bad signs. The foundation trains teachers and doctors to protect kids. Laws make it harder for bad people to take out policies. You're protected by an army of people who learned from what happened to Lucas. "So Lucas is still protecting us?" Maria asked hopefully. "Every single day," I confirmed. "Through every person who learned his story, every law passed in his name, every adult who now knows to watch for danger. Lucas can't be here, but his love created shields around children everywhere." They settled into sleep, comforted by the thought of their invisible protector. I stayed for a moment, watching them breathe easily in beds Lucas would never outgrow. This was victory. Not the family I'd planned, but the family love had built from tragedy. Before bed, I checked my emails. Hundreds of birthday messages for Lucas had arrived from around the world. Families sharing photos of children alive because of the foundation. Legislators confirming support for new protections. Insurance executives announcing stricter policies. Each message a birthday gift for a boy who would never blow out 13 candles. The last email was from Tyler, sent from the prison library. He'd attached a photo of his latest speaking engagement, addressing a conference of insurance professionals. Behind him, a massive screen showed Lucas's photo beside the words, "Never again." "Taught 300 people to recognize fraud patterns today," Tyler wrote. "Happy birthday, nephew. Your uncle is finally brave, just too late to save you, but maybe in time to save others." I climbed into bed emotionally exhausted, but oddly at peace. 2 years ago, I'd thought my life had ended with Lucas's last breath. In a way, it had. The naive woman who'd trusted blindly, who'd believed family meant safety, was gone. In her place stood someone harder, but not bitter broken, but not defeated. Someone who'd learned that evil can wear familiar faces, but that good can grow from unimaginable pain. Someone who'd lost everything and found purpose in the ruins. My parents were serving their 2,469th days in prison, with roughly 7,000 more to go before death would free them. Madison was serving her 730th day, with 3,650 until possible parole. Tyler had served 600 days of his 8-year sentence. But I wasn't counting their days anymore. I was counting lives saved. 238 so far this year, thousands more protected by new laws and awareness, countless others who'd never know they were safe because Lucas's death had exposed the danger. That was the final lesson, the one I'd share tomorrow at the Foundation's birthday memorial for Lucas. Evil is real and sometimes wears the mask of love. But good is stronger, spreading like ripples from a single stone thrown into still water. My parents had thrown Lucas into death's ocean for profit, but he'd created waves of protection that would roll on forever. "Happy birthday, my sweet boy," I whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for teaching us that love isn't measured in years lived, but in lives touched. Sleep with your dolphins. We'll keep watch up here." Outside, a foghorn sounded from the distant harbor, reminding me of the ocean Lucas had loved. Somewhere dolphins swam free in waters my son had dreamed of protecting. Somewhere children breathed easily through inhalers the foundation had provided. Somewhere families went to sleep unaware of the dangers Lucas's story had prevented. And in a small house filled with whale posters and ocean dreams, 2 foster children slept safely, while their guardian kept watch, protecting them with the fierce love she'd learned too late to save her own son. This was Lucas's legacy, love multiplied through loss, protection born from pain and hope rising from the ashes of betrayal. The Morrisons had been a family of killers, but Lucas Morrison had redeemed our name, transforming it from a warning into a promise every child deserves to breathe, to dream, to trust. That family means love, not profit. That was the lesson written in tears and triumph, carved into law and hearts alike. Evil may prosper for a season, but love writes the final chapter. My parents authored death for profit. Lucas authored life through sacrifice. Guess whose story the world chose to continue? Rest easy, my ocean dreamer. Your watch has ended. Ours has just begun. Thank you for joining me today. If you've faced family betrayal or lost someone to greed, know that you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below, and let's build a community of survivors who choose love over profit. Please like this video to help spread awareness about insurance fraud, subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over tragedy, and share this with anyone who needs to know that evil doesn't win in the end. Lucas taught us that even the smallest voice can create waves of change. What waves will you create today? Until next time, hold your loved ones close and remember, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when your world falls apart. Thank you for listening, and may you always choose love.